Game of Thrones, The Red Dragon Lord. Chapter 1. Illegitimate Son. In the year 276 of the Aegon calendar, the southern sunset sea of West Eros, a merchant ship was struggling to move forward in the rough sea. In the cabin, a man was lying weakly on the bed. His face was ashen, pale to the point of being almost transparent. The pain and the persistent high fever had long since deprived him of the ability to speak. His name was Morton Cotoyne, the eldest son of Earl Horton Cotoyne and heir to the Cotoyne family of the Three Towers of the Riverlands. 8 months ago, he travelled to Essos with 2 bodyguards and servants. After his travels, he boarded a merchant ship bound for Old Town, but unfortunately he fell ill on the ship near the end of the voyage. Due to his serious illness and a storm that lasted for 5 days, he was already seasick and was unable to get up from bed after being bedridden. No matter how carefully his fiancée and the servants took care of him, the lack of medical care and medicine on the ship could not stop the flame of life in his eyes from gradually fading. Alice knelt beside his bed, tears streaming down her face like a flood, her hands tightly holding Morton's gradually cooling hands. She has long silver gold hair that falls softly on her slender back like a waterfall. Her eyes are mysterious purple, like violets blooming in the valley, exuding a charming and noble aura. At this time, her belly is slightly bulging, and it is obvious that she is pregnant. Morton looked at his lover tenderly, at her silver hair and purple eyes. This was his greatest gain during his travels, the remaining bloodline of a dragon king. The silver-haired, purple-eyed Targaryen family has used dragons to rule West Eros for 300 years. Countless nobles and scholars believe that they are the closest beings to God. This situation has led to countless families longing for Targaryen blood during these nearly 300 years, especially the women of this family. This is still the case even though the dragons have been extinct for nearly 100 years. But the Targaryen family protected their bloodline very well, even the illegitimate children were controlled by them on Dragonstone Island and none of them left. So far, few families have obtained it. The Cotoyne family, to which Morton belongs, is a small family in the Riverlands of West Eros. They have never had the courage to even think about such a good thing. Until he met Alice, a lowly hotel maid, while traveling. At first he was attracted by her appearance, but he fell in love with her as they got to know each other better. The secret that she revealed to him at the end surprised him even more. But at this time his body could no longer sustain the desire to return to his family. Correspondence alone was not enough to convince his stubborn and cold father. He understood that this bloodline might never be able to be integrated into his family. Morton looked at Alice's slightly bulging belly and felt that he should do something, so he forced himself to say, "Alice, our child is about to come into this world, but I'm afraid I can't wait until that moment. If it's a boy, call him Gavin. Gavin, this name will give him courage and strength, allowing him to face everything in the future." Morton gasped laboriously, and every word seemed to be squeezed out from the depths of his soul. Alice tried to hold back her grief and was already sobbing, but she still nodded and said in a trembling voice, "Okay, Morton, our child will be named Gavin." Morton forced a smile from the corner of his mouth, which seemed to be a deep expectation for the future, and then he slowly closed his eyes. The boat was still shaking, but it could no longer wake up the father who was about to leave. After several days of bumpy ride, the merchant ship finally arrived at the port of Old Town. The guards immediately found the Silent Sisters and asked the Hightower family for help and sent ravens to the Three Towers. Inside the castle, Earl Horton Cotoyne sat on a high seat, reading the letter, his face as gloomy as the sky before a storm, his eyes cold and sharp. "This is a shame for the family," Horton shouted angrily, his voice echoing in the hall like thunder. "The child in her belly has tarnished the honor of my family. Moreover, I will never let my eldest son marry a woman from Volantis." The Earl's roar made the hall silent. Maester Edric looked around at the retainers who were silently bowing their heads. After hesitating for a moment, he advised the Earl, "Sir, forgive me for being blunt, but the Cotoyne family is now very small. If we want to consider the continuation of the bloodline, why don't we? No, this child is illegitimate and cannot be a member of my family. I do not know what dirty tricks that Volantis woman used to seduce my eldest son, but I will never admit it." Maester Edric wanted to say something but was interrupted by the man on the high seat. Earl Horton looked at the guards beside him and ordered, "Go and bring back my son's body. Protect it and don't damage it." He hesitated and said, "Bring that woman back as well. Let her stay in the castle to give birth, but she must leave after giving birth." Then he ordered the maester opposite him, "Edric, send a raven to Highgarden and tell the Tyrell family that my heir has died. I want to make Edmund my new heir. Also, tell Edmund to resign his position and come back quickly. Yes, sir. Edric had no choice but to lower his head and obey. 3 Towers Fort. In a dim guest room, Alice slumped on the edge of the bed, tears flowing freely like a flood. Morton had vowed to marry her and hold a wedding with her after returning to West Eros. Although Morton had passed away, she believed that she and her unborn child would always have a legitimate status. However, when she arrived at the 3 Towers Castle with great expectations, the cruel reality was beyond her expectations. She tried everything, but couldn't even get an audience with the Earl. Every request she made was ruthlessly rejected. Her heart seemed to fall into an abyss, and sadness and despair almost swallowed her. Aegon year 277, 6 months later. It was still the dim guest room. Alice's heart-wrenching screams echoed in the room, and the severe pain almost made her faint. Finally, with the full help of the scholars and maids, the child was born with a clear cry. Although the baby's hair was extremely sparse, it was still visible as silver. Maester Edric picked up the child and observed him carefully for a long time before handing him to the weak Alice and saying, "Congratulations, it's a boy." Then he ordered the servants to help take care of it, and left in a hurry. After several twists and turns, he finally climbed up a tower exhausted. He raised his trembling hands and knocked on the door. Dong dong dong. "Come in." A voice came from inside the house. Chapter 2. Gavin and the Flame. Maester Edric pushed the door open and walked in. Seeing Edmund standing in front of the window, he bowed briefly and said with some joy, "Master Edmund, the child is born, a boy. Both mother and child are safe. His face is very similar to your brother when he was a child, but his hair is silver like his mother's. The child looks very healthy." After hearing the news, Edmund showed a happy expression on his face. "Oh? Really?" The old scholar smiled and nodded. "It is absolutely true, Master." Edmund put his hands behind his back and paced back and forth in the room. "Very good, let the kitchen prepare some good food. Also, does my father know?" The scholar lowered his head slightly, looking embarrassed. "I haven't had time to report to the Earl yet." Edmund stopped walking, his expression serious and his eyes determined. "Then don't tell me. You also know my father's stubbornness." "I will keep it a secret for as long as I can." The bachelor hesitated, "But the Earl will remember it eventually, and those servants." Edmund smiled bitterly. "It's okay. I'll tell the people below to keep their mouths shut. If father finds out, he can say it was my order and put the blame on me." The bachelor took a deep breath and nodded solemnly. "Yes, I know what to do, Master Edmund." He bowed to Edmund again and left. Gavin's birth did not bring much joy to this cold castle. Only his mother Alice looked at him with joy. Zhongming regained consciousness and found himself in a completely unfamiliar environment. Everything around him became huge and blurry, and his body was so small and weak. Then, he was horrified to find that he could not speak, and even simple movements were difficult to complete. This small body was completely out of his control. The unfamiliar environment and situation made Zhongming confused. Then, he remembered that he was playing games at home and accidentally knocked over the cup on the keyboard. After a series of crackling sounds, he lost consciousness. Could it be that I traveled through time? Traveled through time and became a baby, he tried to observe the people around him, those unfamiliar faces. There was only one woman, with wet silver hair and purple eyes full of endless tenderness. "Is this my mother in this life?" He opened his mouth to say something, but what came out was the sound of a baby crying. 282 Aegon. Zhongming, or Gavin Flowers, was standing on the beach at the moment, holding an iron pot tightly in his hand, looking at the blue sea. He walked carefully to the beach, squatted down, and slowly put the iron pot into the water. When the pot was filled with sea water, he felt the weight of the sea water and the iron pot. He lifted the pot with great effort and walked step by step to the pile of firewood prepared in advance. Gavin put down the iron pot and began to build a fire skillfully. His little hands kept fiddling with branches and hay, and beads of sweat gradually appeared on his forehead. "This body is still small, and I'm so tired after doing such a small amount of work, but it will be easy next." He put his hand close to the hay and snapped his fingers. A weak flame appeared out of thin air between his fingers and instantly ignited the hay. The flame jumped happily and gradually became stronger. Gavin looked at the fire he had lit out of thin air with his fingers. Although he was used to it, he was very excited every time he used it. He discovered this ability when he was 4 years old. At that time, he was using a flint to light a fire. Perhaps the flint was damp, and he tried for a long time without success. Instead, his hand became sore. Just when he was frustrated and tried it for the last time, a spark appeared on the palm of his hand. He was scared at the time and thought he was hallucinating. After calming down, he tried again and a flame really appeared. Although the flame flashed and went out, Gavin was sure that it was not an hallucination. Gavin was very surprised to suddenly gain magical powers. After calming down, he didn't tell anyone, including his mother in this life. After all, through his observations of his surroundings over the years since he was born, he traveled to a world similar to the Middle Ages. He was afraid that if he rashly displayed his extraordinary abilities, he would be burned to death as a monster. Gavin figured it out but didn't tell anyone. He just practiced silently when he was alone. Now he can light the flame at will and keep it lasting for 1 minute. Placing the iron pot steadily on the fire, Gavin stared at the sea water in the pot without blinking. As the flames roasted, the sea water began to emit steam, and gradually, water droplets condensed on the pot wall and rolled down. Gavin's little face was roasted red by the fire, and he held a branch in his hand and poked the campfire from time to time to make it burn more vigorously. The sea water in the pot kept rolling, and bubbles came out one after another. When most of the water evaporated, a layer of white crystals appeared at the bottom of the pot. However, these crystals were not pure enough, but this was the salt eaten by the common people in this world. Without hesitation, Gavin quickly turned off the fire and let the iron pot cool down slightly. Then, he carefully took out the coarse salt from the pot and placed it on a clean cloth. Next, he took some clean water, gently poured it on the coarse salt, and began to stir. After stirring evenly, he put the mixture into the pot again and heated it for secondary purification. The third time, I put in a handful of wood ash. After repeating this process many times, crystal white salt blocks appeared at the bottom of the pot. Wiping the sweat off his head, Gavin carefully collected the refined salt, put it into a small cloth bag, and began to crush it. After the work was done, Gavin carefully cleaned up the fire, put the pot in order, picked up the iron pot, and walked towards the town under the castle with satisfaction on his face. On the way back to town, Gavin touched the bag of salt in his arms. This was the result of his hard work for half a day, and a happy expression appeared on his face. This small bag of salt can be exchanged for 5 copper stars. In this small town, 2 copper stars can be exchanged for 1 loaf of bread, but that kind of bread is very hard and cannot be compared with the bread Gavin had eaten in his previous life. After the bread here cools down, it can even be used as a weapon. In terms of hardness, it is no less powerful than a brick. The people in the small town under the castle, close to the sea, are not short of salt, but most of the common people can only afford coarse salt, which tastes very bitter. Only the nobles in the castle eat fine salt, and most of it is mined from salt mines. The people here do not have the technology to purify sea salt, and the price of fine salt is 10 times that of coarse salt. Gavin used the knowledge from his previous life to secretly make some to sell in order to supplement his family income. He and his mother had lived in the castle for a period of time before, and the quantity he sold each time was not large, so he has not attracted the attention of others so far. However, if he continues to sell, it may attract the attention of someone with ulterior motives, and in serious cases, it may bring danger. Chapter 3. 3 Towers. Since Gavin was born, he lived in the castle with his mother Alice. His mother worked as a laundry worker in the castle. Gavin also learned about the situation here and his life experience through the conversations of people around him. After all, the servants never avoided a young child when they talked. His father, Morton Codoan, the Earl's eldest son, died of illness on the ship back to the territory, leaving only Alice who was pregnant with Gavin. In this world, the marriages of nobles would not be recognized without the mediation of monks and registration of scholars, and the children born would be called illegitimate children. Moreover, according to other people's discussions, Gavin's mother Alice was a foreigner from another continent. Gavin lived in the castle for 3 years, but his cheap grandfather, the Earl, never showed up. Instead, he tried to drive Gavin and his mother out of the castle many times. It was only because of his cheap uncle Edmund's strong resistance that he was not driven out. It is said that Edmund was punished by the Earl many times for this. Sir Edmund would occasionally visit him and even bring some toys that Gavin didn't need. Just when Gavin thought he would grow up here, an accident happened. The War of the Usurper broke out, and the Codoan family responded to the call of the feudal lord, the Tyrrell family. His uncle Edmund Codoin, as the heir to the Three Towers, replaced his elderly father, Earl Houghton, to go to Highgarden to respond to the call and followed the feudal lord to lead troops to attack the Storm Lands. Not long after Sir Edmund left, Gavin and his mother were expelled from the castle. Perhaps Sir Edmund had anticipated this and had arranged accommodation for Gavin and his mother in the town below the castle in advance. Alice was also assigned a job of washing clothes in the military camp. From time to time, people from the castle would send some money and property to subsidize their lives. The pain of losing her lover, the loss of Gavin, and the years of hard work had taken their toll on Alice, causing her health to deteriorate. Her face had lost its former luster, her skin had become rough, her eyes were sunken, and she looked exhausted and haggard. She was often seriously ill and bedridden. The family's finances were often cut off because of this. Alice, with her frail body, occasionally did laundry, but the meager income was just enough to support the difficult lives of the mother and son. If it weren't for the frequent deliveries of money and property from the castle, the lives of the mother and son would have been in jeopardy. The pressure of life forced Gavin to use his own means to refine refined salt in exchange for some income, but he had no choice. Gavin knew that using knowledge far beyond this world to make refined salt was undoubtedly risky. He had thought about it repeatedly before making the decision. If someone with ulterior motives found out, it would cause trouble. After all, if this technology was in his hands, it would be like a child carrying gold through a busy city. He had no power to protect it. Gavin was already considering whether to give away this technology for refining refined salt in exchange for something. After going around a hill full of thorns and weeds, Gavin could already see the town under the castle. At this time, his forehead was covered with sweat. Gavin raised his sleeve to wipe the sweat. He couldn't help but complain about his young body that had not yet grown up, thinking that even this short distance was difficult to cope with. The Three Towers Castle is like a shining pearl, located on the cliffs on the south bank of Whispering Bay, facing the junction of Redwine Strait and Whispering Bay. It is only 3 days away from the old town of the Hightower family. The scenery here is magnificent. The castle is like a resolute giant, standing on the top of the cliff by the sea. The three towers are like 3 sharp swords piercing the sky. They are not only watchtowers to guard against enemies at sea, but also lighthouses to guide the direction of ships at night. The Three Towers Castle is also named after these 3 towers. This is a purely military castle. Due to its relatively small area, people living in the castle gradually expanded outside the castle. After a long time, a small town was slowly built under the castle. The Three Towers Castle is the family castle of the Codoin family. Together with the 2 small towns and dozens of villages attached to it, it forms the Three Towers territory. The history of the Codoin family is long, dating back to the time of the ancestors, and it was once powerful. However, in the thrilling Dance with Dragons more than 100 years ago, the then Lord Owen Codoin fought for the Black Party, but he did not expect to be killed tragically by John Rockton's sword in the Battle of the Mead River, and most of the family members died with the Lord. The death of the Lord caused the family's strength to decline sharply, and then the Three Towers Castle was captured by the Hightower family. It was not until the end of the Dance with the Blood Dragons that it returned to the Codoin family. At this time, the Codoin family only had an underage son to succeed the throne. In the 100 years after the Dance with the Blood Dragons, the Hightower family often clamped down on them and suppressed them, and their situation became increasingly difficult and embarrassing. Now, there are only 3 knights left in the family, and only 100 professional soldiers on standby. Even if the militia in the territory is recruited to the maximum extent, it is difficult to pull out a team of 1,000 people. It is already quite difficult to deal with the Ironmen's looting of villages and towns. If it weren't for the Redwen family's fleet regularly patrolling the strait ahead, the scale of the Ironmen who come here to loot is not large, otherwise the fishing villages near the sea would have been looted long ago. In an unnamed tavern in the small town, Gavin handed the salt to the proprietress Raman. When Raman saw the 6-year-old Gavin coming to sell salt again, she couldn't help but pinch his pink face, then weighed the cloth bag of salt, took out 5 bronze stars from behind the counter and gave Gavin 5 bronze stars. She touched Gavin's head and said, "I squeezed a lot of goat milk this morning. I'll bring it to you." As Gavin thanked her, she walked towards the kitchen. The boss lady of Raman has become Gavin's only regular customer in recent months. Through previous contacts and understanding, Gavin found that this boss lady is very down to earth. Especially to children, she is very friendly, and most importantly, she always gives Gavin some extra food. 6-year-old Gavin looks like a delicate porcelain doll. His silver hair makes his fair face as soft as mutton fat jade, with a faint blush. His big watery eyes are like the twinkling purple stars in the night sky, bright and lively. Gavin leaned against the counter and listened to the conversations of people in the pub. This was also an important channel for him to obtain information from the outside world. The mainstream topic is always about the ongoing usurper war. As people of the Reach, everyone is looking forward to the Reach winning the war. In particular, they hope that Sir Edmund will return victorious and glorious. Every time a major victory is achieved, the territory will hold a grand celebration, and many people are looking forward to participating in it. Chapter 4. High Valley Ryan. But Gawain knew that the Tyrells did not win the war in the end. They were just stranded in a camp outside Storm's End for more than a year until Robert Baratheon defeated Rhaegar Targaryen and ascended the Iron Throne, and the war ended. The King Aerys Targaryen, to whom the Reach was originally loyal, was murdered by his Kingsguard, while the former enemy turned into the new king. The Tyrells even besieged the king's castle for a whole year, forcing the king's brother to eat rats in the castle. I'm afraid that the Tyrells will have to work non-stop to ease relations with the Iron Throne. According to the plot timeline, the war is about to end. Soon Raman came out quickly with a small can of goat's milk. He first pinched Gavin's face affectionately, then handed him the goat's milk, then squatted down and kissed his pink little face tenderly. Although Gavin felt very embarrassed, in order not to reveal his flaws, he could only pretend to be a child and accept it silently. After all, the other party not only gave money, but also some extra food. And according to Gavin's understanding, the 40-year-old layman boss lady still has no children of her own, so he could understand the other party's behavior. Walking on the path home, Gavin's mind was in a tizzy, thinking about the plot of this world. Yes, Gavin had figured it out 3 years ago that the world he came to was exactly the American TV series Game of Thrones that he had watched in his previous life. At first he thought this was the Middle Ages in a parallel world, until 3 years ago when the servants in the castle started talking about it. Robert Baratheon of Storm's End, together with Eddard Stark of the North, Hoster Tully of the Riverlands, and Jon Arryn of the Vale, launched a rebellion against the Iron Throne. These familiar names and families instantly brought back Gavin's past memories. It was at this time that his uncle Edmund Codoin responded to the call and led his troops to Highgarden. If we calculate according to the time of the plot, the war will end soon. Gavin, who knows the direction of the plot, is also quietly planning his future path in his heart. With the unique advantage of foresight, can he successfully cling to the thigh of a powerful person in the future, so as to naturally get rid of his identity as an illegitimate child that makes him discriminated against, and transform himself into a noble lord? Just like Bronn in the play. You know, Bronn was originally just a mercenary of humble origin, but eventually became a de facto earl. Moreover, the knowledge and technology that Gavin possessed far surpassed the current level of this world. He firmly believed that with these advanced and unique things, he would be able to open up an industry that would bring him huge wealth. In addition, Gavin is more interested in magic. In this world, magic is real and undoubtedly exists, and as far as the current situation is concerned, he already has the potential to perform magic. Gavin secretly wondered, if he could find a way to study systematically, after the arrival of the Red Comet, would he be able to become stronger in magic, and would he be able to gain more powerful power and pursue more mysterious and extraordinary things? For all of this, he was full of expectations and longings. Gavin suppressed his chaotic thoughts, carefully held the small can of goat milk, and hurried back home. Inside the house, his mother lay weakly on the bed, coughing one after another, as if she was going to cough out her heart and lungs. Seeing Gavin coming back, his mother endured the discomfort of her body, tried to squeeze out a smile, and greeted him. Then, the mother struggled to sit up and said in a slightly hoarse voice, "It's time for us to study." She took out a book from a small box under the bed. The cover of the book was worn and the paper was made of sheepskin. A year ago, his mother began to teach him some strange words and languages. Recently, this teaching has become more frequent and systematic. But strangely, these words and languages do not belong to the common language of Westeros. Gavin also secretly guessed that this might be the language and words of Essos. After all, his mother came from there. Although he was full of curiosity, he knew that knowledge was extremely valuable and it was never a bad thing to master one more language, so he never went to the bottom of it. In the evening, Gavin finished teaching. Alice looked at her smart son, who had learned to read and write High Valley Ryan in just 1 year. There was something inexplicable in her eyes, and she unconsciously touched the pendant on her chest. "This is a unique pendant," carefully carved from bone. The overall shape is round and oval, smooth to the touch but with a hint of mysterious coolness. On its surface, there is a hexagonal pattern protruding. This pattern is strange and bizarre, as if it contains some ancient and profound secrets, and it seems to be a symbol of mysterious power. Alice's eyes gradually became firm as she touched the pendant, as if she had made up her mind. Alice gently stroked Gavin's silver hair, her face full of tenderness, and asked softly, "Gavin, have you heard of Valeria?" Gavin was very surprised that his mother would suddenly ask this question. However, after thinking about the plot he answered after a little thought, "I've heard from the maesters in the castle that the Valerian freehold was extremely powerful before the doom. There were 40 dragon families who jointly held political meetings. They had thousands of dragons and conquered most of the continent of Essos. But after the doom, all the dragon families except the Targaryens disappeared. Even though the Targaryens who survived were only a small marginal family among the 40 dragon families, the power they left behind still successfully conquered Westeros." Gavin looked at his mother's silver hair and purple eyes with doubts in his heart. Then he thought about his own similar appearance and made some guesses in his heart. He asked tentatively, "Mother, why are you asking me this question?" Alice's expression suddenly became serious, and she said to Gavin, "Gavin, in fact, after the doomsday, not only the Targaryen family survived, but also many Dragon King families. However, after the doomsday, the dragons outside also died one after another for unknown reasons. In the following bloody age, several major city-states rebelled, and the rioting slaves killed many dragon kings who lost their dragons. Only the Targaryen who hid on Dragonstone survived." Gavin stared at his mother with wide eyes in disbelief, but in his heart he was looking forward to his guess and waiting for her to continue. Chapter 5. Bellerus. "Gavin, I want to tell you a secret. I have only told your father before. My real name is Alice Bellerus, and I am also one of the bloodlines of the Dragon King left after the Doomsday catastrophe." Then he took out 2 books with torn covers from the box under the bed, handed them to Gavin and continued, "One of these 2 books records some of the history of the Bellerus family. It was carried by the ancestor who survived the Doomsday catastrophe. The other is a diary written by the ancestor after the Doomsday catastrophe, which tells some family secrets. Because of these secrets, I am the only one left in the family now." Gavin took the book and flipped through it quickly. He thought to himself, as expected, "I am also qualified to ride a dragon." He then asked Alice, "Mother, the words written in this book are the strange words you taught me. So, you taught me the words so that I can understand this book?" Alice smiled gently, showing her tenderness, and replied softly, "Yes, Gavin. The language and writing I teach you are High Valyrian, which is also the language that everyone in our family must master. You can take a look at these contents. As for whether you want to pursue the secrets in the diary, you can make your own decision when you grow up." Gavin was sitting by the sea water was boiling in the pot in front of him. The flame was getting smaller due to lack of firewood, but Gavin's mind was not on it at all. The secret that Alice had told him 2 nights ago was still lingering in his mind. He had already read the book and had a general understanding of the history of his mother's family. Most of the books describing the history of the Bellerese family are filled with words of praise for the Bellerese family's power, and substantive key information is relatively scarce. But even so, through the content between the lines of the book, we can still understand the powerful Valeria at that time, some aspects of the freehold, and the political situation in the freehold parliament. The book also emphasizes the absolute status of the Bellerese family in the freehold of Valeria. According to the book, 40 Dragon King families together form the Freehold Council of Valeria, and the entire country is ruled by the council. The parliament is jointly managed by the 3 upper Dragon King families who serve as the parliament president. Other Dragon King families can participate in the voting, and the number of votes is linked to the strength of the family. The surviving Targaryen is one of them, but according to the description in the book, they have basically no say in the parliament. The Bellerus family is not an ordinary Dragon King family, but one of the 3 upper families that manage the council, and even has the power of veto in the Free Fortress Council. The first and most powerful dragon owned by the family is named Bellerus, which is also the origin of the family's surname. The book describes that Bellerus lived for 800 years, and when he soared in the sky, he blocked out the sun. During dragon fights, he could even turn his flesh and blood into flames, thus protecting himself from all harm. Even the dragon rider he rode turned into flames along with the dragon. Even in Valeria at that time, this dragon was almost invincible. In addition to the ability to control dragons, most of the Belaris family members have awakened the ability of fire magic. Even without dragons, the Belaris people who master the power of magic should not be underestimated. In contrast, the other two upper families control the abilities of blood witchcraft and prophecy respectively. The owner recorded in another diary was named Arphus Belaris, who was also the ancestor of Gavin's bloodline. During the doomsday, 18-year-old Arphus happened to be in Bravus, and thus he was lucky enough to escape the doomsday. However, his dragon was only a young dragon that could be ridden. During the Bloody Age, the slaves rioted and killed the dragon. Arphus took the opportunity to escape from Bravus, and even the family sword he carried with him was lost, and became a collection in the Sea King's treasury. Since then, Arphus has been wandering around Essos, not even daring to admit his last name. According to his memories in his diary, the Belaris family had set up a secret underground dragon cave in their land far away from Valeria, which contained dragon eggs, much of the family's knowledge, and countless gold and silver treasures. The dragon cave was so deep underground that even the doomsday catastrophe might not be able to destroy it. Arphus wanted to return to the ruins of Valeria to look for it, but the smoke and dust after the doomsday obscured everything, and people could not even get close to the sea of smoke surrounding Valeria. It was not until 30 years later that the smoke and dust slowly dissipated. At the age of nearly 50, Arphus decided to explore the dragon cave of his family and retrieve the family treasure and dragon eggs. So he gave the remaining keepsakes and other things to his descendants, and went to explore the place recorded in the diary alone, but he never came back. In the following hundreds of years, many people in the family went to Valeria, but none of them returned. Today, only Alice is left in the family. It was not until she met Morton and chose to settle down that she came to West Eros. The fire was about to go out due to lack of firewood, which awakened Gavin's tangled thoughts. He hurriedly added firewood and fiddled with the flames to prevent it from going out. After doing all this, Gavin touched the pendant hanging on his chest. The pendant was milky white all over, with a smooth and warm surface. Under the dim light, it seemed to have a mysterious luster. According to the book and my mother, this pendant is a token of the Belaris family. The dragon bone that carved it is from the most powerful dragon in the family, Belaris. Gavin touched the pendant and looked at it carefully. His mother gave it to Gavin that night. As soon as he touched the pendant, he could feel the energy contained in the pendant. However, after 2 days of research, he still couldn't figure it out. He could only feel the energy in the pendant flowing into his body, but it was quite slowly. Gavin was confused for a moment and could only put aside his doubts, put away today's achievements, and walk towards the town. Soon Gavin came to the familiar tavern again. As soon as he entered the door, the proprietress Raman came up to him with a smile, stretched out her hands and pinched his face again, muttering, "Wow, Gavin, this little guy is really getting more handsome." The pub was extremely lively at this time, and the guests were discussing current affairs enthusiastically. "Have you heard? Robert Baratheon smashed Prince Rhaegar's chest with a hammer, and the war is about to end." A bearded man shouted loudly. "Your news is outdated. The war is over. Tywin Lannister tricked open the gates of King's Landing and looted the capital." Another tall and thin man continued. Chapter 6. Panel. "That's right. The Lannisters are truly cruel and ruthless." An old man in coarse linen clothes kept shaking his head and sighing. "I also heard that the Mountain raped and murdered Prince Rhaegar's wife and brutally killed his 2 children. You know, the Mountain's knight was appointed by Prince Rhaegar himself." A one-eyed man took a big gulp of wine. At this time, Layman took a few eggs and handed them to Gavin, saying to him, "Little guy, I heard that the Tyrell family has withdrawn its troops, lifted the siege of Phoenix's Rest, and announced that they recognize Robert Baratheon as king. It won't be long before Sir Edmund will be back. When the sergeant comes back, your life will be much better. Little guy, maybe you will be able to return to the castle soon." After telling the good news, Raman saw that Gavin had no reaction. He was just trembling with a surprised expression on his face. Thinking that he was very excited, he rubbed his little face and said, "You must be very happy, Gavin. Come on, grab your things and go home quickly." Gavin walked on the bumpy and winding path back home. The setting sun was like blood, stretching his thin but tough figure. The evening breeze blew his hair, his face showed uncontrollable excitement, and his mind was surging like a tide. It was not the news just now, but the energy of the pendant seemed to be absorbed, and a panel appeared in front of him. "Host, Gavin Budhog, 6 Bloodline Blood and Fire Dragonborn, Development 15%. The bloodline of the Dragon King of Valeria, the ability to ride dragons and manipulate fire, has not yet been fully stimulated. Domination 15. Your followers can be upgraded through the panel. Skill High Valerian, Proficient Fire Manipulation, Getting Started. Energy Points 3, obtained by automatically absorbing the magic power floating around, or actively absorbing the magic power. His heart was in turmoil. This panel made him very excited, and he thought to himself, I told you, if you have time travel, how can you not have the golden finger? All the previous feelings, the heavy sense of humiliation, the oppression that follows you everywhere, and the bottomless confusion facing the unknown world, at this moment, disappeared without a trace like morning mist under the rising warm sun. The plan of clinging to someone powerful that he had been determined to do was gradually forgotten. Ambition suddenly swelled in his heart, like a wild horse that had broken free from its reins, and it was out of control. He thought that even the iron chair that symbolized supreme power was not unqualified for him to sit on. Besides, he also wanted to get one of the extremely precious dragon eggs. After all, I am a dragon in this life, which means I have the possibility of riding a dragon. Although there are no dragon eggs at the moment, haven't the 3 dragon eggs of the dragon mother in the plot been hatched? Maybe I can get them through planning, and there may be other dragon eggs. In this backward world like the Middle Ages, the meaning of dragons is completely different. They have absolute air superiority on the battlefield and oppression on the enemy. After a long time of fantasizing, Gavin calmed down. Dragons are not invincible in this world. In the play, a dragon hunting crossbow can kill a dragon, and the Night King can shoot a dragon with a javelin. Moreover, his current identity is just a bastard. Even with the advantage of foresight in the future, it is difficult to determine to what extent he can plan. The dragon egg is even more distant. At least Daenerys is still an exiled royal family, so she was able to receive the dragon egg. Then Gavin stared at the strange gold finger panel in front of him with burning eyes, his sight fixed firmly on the plus sign behind the bloodline and skills. After careful consideration, Gavin finally decided to add a little energy to the bloodline first. When he gently clicked the plus sign behind the strength attribute, the bloodline development suddenly became 16%, and a warm current suddenly surged from his body, flowing to his limbs and bones at a speed faster than lightning. He clearly felt that his muscles seemed to be quietly expanding, and his strength was constantly increasing like a tide. Even the iron pot that originally felt heavy in his hand became much lighter. However, Gavin also understood that this was just an illusion of his physical condition suddenly becoming stronger, but his physical fitness was indeed enhanced by improving his bloodline. Then, Gavin turned his attention to the skills. There were only 2, High Valerian and Fire Control. After a little thought, he invested a little more energy into Fire Control. The entry level on the panel instantly turned into proficiency. A sense of experience and knowledge of fire control appeared in his mind, as if he had practiced for countless years. He hurried to an empty corner and snapped his fingers impatiently. A brilliant flame instantly ignited at his fingertips. Compared with the previous one, this flame was more vigorous and hotter, and it was even easier to control it. It seemed to be completely obedient to his will, becoming more flexible and free, and dancing freely with his thoughts easily. Excited Gavin looked at the command on the panel again, but there was no plus sign behind it. It seemed that he could not use it under his current conditions. Deeply feeling the significant changes in his body and abilities, Gavin is full of confidence and expectations for the future. Looking at the remaining 1 point of energy, he couldn't help but fall into deep thought, secretly guessing that the source of these energy points was most likely from the mysterious magic contained in the dragon bones. It seems that he must find ways to collect more energy points in the future. However, it is really difficult to obtain energy points. At present, he only knows that dragon bones contain magic power, but with his current identity, it is not easy to obtain dragon bones. Gavin remembered that there were a large number of dragon bones in the Red Castle in the plot, and there were also many dragon bone crafts scattered in the world, but these things were either extremely difficult to obtain or very expensive. And because of some unspeakable strange effects, many male nobles in this world flock to dragon bones, and they even grind them into powder and swallow them. This has led to most of the dragon bones in circulation being ground into powder and consumed. It seems that I have to find a way to learn more skills. I have already made a decision in my heart to offer the refined salt manufacturing method in exchange for an opportunity, and it can only be offered to one person. The powerful and kind chief uncle in the territory, Edmund Codoan. As it happens, according to the plot he knew, This bloody and cruel usurper war has come to an end. At this time, Sir Edmund is about to return. After making the decision, Gavin's mind did not stop, but was spinning rapidly, thinking about what kind of solution he could get from it. At the same time, he was also repeatedly thinking about how to present this salt-making method. Should he present it directly to his uncle? Or should he find an appropriate time to highlight its value? Chapter 7. Edmund. In the year 284 of the Aegon calendar, Sir Edmund led his troops back to the Three Towers. Although they did not win the war, no one in the Three Towers expedition was killed or injured. To this end, Earl Horton announced that he would hold a banquet in the castle to celebrate the safe return of his heir, and generously distributed food to the people. There was jubilation inside and outside the castle, and people were immersed in this long-lost joy. After the banquet in the castle, Sir Edmund was called to the study by Earl Horton alone. In the spacious but slightly gloomy study, Holden paced back and forth in the room with his hands behind his back, looking gloomy. Edmund sat in a chair, looking equally unhappy. Holden stopped abruptly, turned around, glared at Edmund, and scolded loudly, "You are such an ignorant person. During the war, you clashed with the Hightower family for a woman, and almost had a duel. Do you know that our family is now weak, with only the two of us left? You are causing so much trouble outside. What if something happens to you? What will happen to the family? Who will it be passed on to?" His voice echoed in the study, and the muscles on his face trembled slightly with anger. Edmund stood up with a bang, his face flushed, and he loudly retorted, "Father, we are mortal enemies with the Hightower family anyway. This time it is obvious that they are humiliating the Codoan family. They dared to flirt with my fiancée in front of me." Then, seeing that Earl Horton's expression had eased a little, Edmund tried again, "Besides, if you really think that your family is too small, why don't you acknowledge your brother's child and incorporate him into the family? At least you can bring him back to the castle to train him. After all, he is the bloodline of the Codoan family." Holden snorted coldly, turned his head away, and said coldly, "Absolutely impossible. That's a bastard, and the illegitimate child will never tarnish the honor of my family." After that, he sighed heavily. After a pause, he looked at Edmund and said coldly, "Now I will leave all the affairs of the castle to you to manage, and it's up to you to make decisions. But you have no right to add members to the family. At least wait until I die." After that, he waved his sleeves and no longer looked at Edmund. Edmund clenched his fists, gritted his teeth, and finally sat down helplessly, sighing heavily. When they finished their conversation and walked out of the study, Sir Edmund had a thoughtful look on his face. The Codoan family suffered no losses in this war, but they also failed to gain the expected benefits. Edmund originally wanted to use his contributions in the war to ask Lord Mace Tyrell to decide the ownership of two disputed villages located on the border between the Corton and Hightower families. However, the war ended hastily and the matter was ultimately left unresolved. He called his attendant and asked in a serious tone, "What has happened in the territory recently while I was away?" The servant bowed his head and reported the recent affairs of the territory respectfully. Sir Edmund listened quietly, nodding slightly from time to time, frowning from time to time. Suddenly, Edmund seemed to remember something and asked again, "How are the mother and son outside the castle?" The attendant hesitated for a moment, then said after thinking for a moment, "Sir, the mother and son live a relatively peaceful life, but—" Sir Edmund's eyes narrowed, and he pressed on, "Just what? Don't hesitate. Sir, some high-quality refined salt that only nobles can eat has been circulating in the territory since I don't know when. After my investigation, I found that it points to your brother's illegitimate son, Gavin Flowers." Edmund suddenly became interested and asked, "Does my father know?" "I don't know, sir. You asked me to take care of the mother and son. I dare not make a decision on my own. I want to wait for you to return before making arrangements. After all, selling salt without permission is against the law of the territory." The servant replied respectfully. Edmund was relieved after hearing the answer. He was the second son of the Earl. According to the customs of West Eros, he had no chance to inherit the family castle and title. All of these originally belonged to his eldest brother. The Earl also found a way out for him. He was sent to the Tyrell family as a knight's squire early on. After being knighted, he served as a captain of the Duke's Guard. However, a letter from his father 6 years ago changed his original life trajectory. His brother died of illness on the way home, and overnight he became the heir to the Three Towers. Even the Tyrell family introduced a woman from the side branch of the family as his fiancée. This series of sudden news brought him both the surprise of gaining the inheritance and the grief of losing his brother. After getting what belonged to his brother, he felt somewhat guilty and took good care of his brother's illegitimate child and the woman from Volantis. After thinking for a moment, Edmund decided to meet the child and take them back to the castle. The next day, Alice went to work in the barracks, while Gavin prepared lunch alone at home. The fire in the stove was burning, and the smoke was rising. He skillfully turned the food in the pot. At this moment, there was a knock on the slightly worn and mottled door of his house. Gavin wiped his hands quickly and walked out the door quickly. Outside the door, he saw a man dressed as an aristocrat, and he greeted him respectfully and politely. "Good afternoon, sir, I wonder what you want from me." Edmund raised his head slightly, stared at Gavin sharply, and asked, "Do you know who I am?" Without waiting for Gavin to answer, he said, "Forget it, you are just a child, where is your mother?" "Lord Edmund, my mother should be doing laundry over at the barracks and should be back soon." "Do you know me?" Edmund asked in surprise after seeing Gavin's answer. "I saw you outside the castle on the day of your triumphant return," Gavin said respectfully. "Triumph? I can't be called a triumph. I just took the troops for a stroll. I didn't get any honor in this war." Edmund curled his lips and said with a helpless look, "Sir, although you did not win the war, your utmost loyalty is touching and worthy of admiration." Gavin took the opportunity to compliment him. "Ha ha ha," Edmund laughed after hearing the answer. It was obvious that Gavin's compliment was very useful to him. At the same time, he also found that although this child was only 6 years old, he answered the questions clearly and was obviously very smart. Moreover, there was no fear in his eyes like other people in the territory when facing nobles, but only clear and calm eyes. This little guy is worth training. Edmund thought for a while and asked, "Little Gavin, do you know who your father is?" "I've heard something about it, sir. People around me are talking about it, and my mother also told me about it," Gavin replied calmly. Edmund's eyes revealed a hint of curiosity and scrutiny, and he asked, "Little guy, do you hate the Kodoan family?" Chapter 8. Growth and Swordsmanship. Gavin took a deep breath, bowed to Edmund and replied, "I don't hate you, sir. I am grateful to my father for giving me life, and thank you for helping me and my mother." Edmund did not say anything after hearing this but observed Gavin carefully and found that there was sincerity in his eyes and that a 6-year-old child would not pretend. Gavin took the opportunity to muster up his courage and said, "Sir, I have a way to make salt. I can extract coarse sea salt and turn it into expensive refined salt. The production method is quite simple. I would like to present this method to you to thank you for taking care of me and my mother for so many years." Edmund smiled and said, "Let's not rush the refined salt issue. Since you have guessed your life story, I want you to come back to the castle with me. But after you return to the castle, I will let Coach Ryan train you in swordsmanship. Can you bear this hardship?" Gavin was very surprised and quickly replied, "Of course, sir, I am looking forward to learning swordsmanship and hope to become a glorious knight in the future." Edmund laughed after hearing this, ruffled Gavin's hair, and said, "Then it's settled, little Gavin, I'll send someone to pick you and your mother up this afternoon. I hope you can work hard and become a powerful knight in the future." Gavin and his mother had returned to the castle to live. That night after returning to the castle, Gavin took the written salt-making method and gave it to Sir Edmund. After a simple calculation of the profits, Edmund was surprised. With the profits from salt production, the family's strength could become even stronger, which undoubtedly brought a stable income to the Kodoan family. Looking at Gavin in front of him, he felt that bringing Gavin back to the castle was the right thing to do. In this way, Gavin officially lived in the castle. The territory would select clean-born children from the families of the territory's soldiers for training, and Gavin was also involved. After more than 10 days of training, occasionally after the morning group training, Coach Ryan would give Gavin some special training in the afternoon. It was still early in the morning and the sun was still half hidden behind the clouds and had not yet fully risen. Gavin and a dozen or so young children, full of expectation and nervousness, stood neatly on the training ground in front of the stable. Their eyes were focused on Coach Ryan, who was standing in front of them with his arms folded and a serious face. Coach Ryan looked at the children in front of him with a dignified look, and said in a steady and powerful voice, "Children, from today on, I will teach you how to use the sword. The sword will be your most important partner in the future. The sword is not only a weapon, it is also a symbol of your honor, courage, and faith. When using the sword, you must be steady in your heart, hands, and eyes. The sword must be wielded with strength and skill. Remember, every time you swing the sword, you must go all out, because on the battlefield, the sword is your life. Coach Ryan paused, then continued, now the first thing you need to learn is to hold the sword. Soon it was afternoon and Gavin received a notice from Coach Ryan asking him to come over. Knowing the benefits of special treatment, Gavin rushed over excitedly. After seeing the coach, Gavin saluted respectfully and said, "Good afternoon, Coach Ryan." Coach Ryan glanced at Gavin and said loudly in a careless manner, "Boy, don't dawdle now that you're here, start with the basics." Then he threw a wooden sword to Gavin. Gavin hurriedly caught the wooden sword and waited nervously for the coach's next instruction. Coach Ryan straightened his body and said in a loud voice, "Today we will learn how to swing the sword first, watch out." He spread his feet shoulder-width apart, leaned forward slightly, and held the hilt tightly with his right hand. He swung the wooden sword from the right to the left with force. His movements were smooth and majestic. Jiawen tried to imitate the coach, but his movements were extremely clumsy. The swing of his arms was pitifully small, and his strength was completely misdirected. He was crooked and uncoordinated. "Hey! Boy, are you chasing flies? Pay attention to the strength of your arms, and use the rotation of your waist to drive your arms." Coach Ryan shouted at the top of his voice. Gavin's face immediately turned red. He tried again and barely passed, but he still couldn't get it right. Next, Coach Ryan began to teach the chopping technique. He held the wooden sword tightly with both hands, raised it high, and then chopped it down fiercely, shouting loudly, "Like this, use all your strength." Gavin did as he was told, but when he chopped for the first time, he used too much force and almost stumbled and fell to the ground. "Hold on! Hold on! Release the strength evenly, don't exert force randomly like a headless fly." Coach Ryan widened his eyes and shouted angrily. With repeated unremitting attempts, Gavin gradually got the knack of chopping and his movements became more and more skillful. After that, the coach began to teach the straight thrust. "Boy, when you thrust straight, keep your eyes on the target, move your body's center of gravity forward, and stretch your arms straight." When Gavin first started stabbing straight ahead, he was always unable to hit the target accurately, and his speed was as slow as a snail. But he gritted his teeth, and under the strict teaching of Coach Ryan and his own unremitting efforts, Gavin gradually mastered the technique of straight stabbing, and his speed and accuracy were significantly improved. At the end of a day's training, Gavin was exhausted, panting, and sweating, but his eyes were full of dedication to swordsmanship and longing for the future. When Gavin returned home, he suddenly found a new change on the panel. There was an additional skill: swordsmanship, beginner. There was also a plus sign at the end. Gavin stared at the panel with a fiery gaze and shouted in his heart, "Finally I've gotten started." Then he added the last energy point without hesitation. The art of swordsmanship instantly went from being a beginner to being familiar with it. Some experiences and techniques of holding and wielding the sword instantly emerged in his mind, as if he had been practicing swordsmanship for many years and experienced countless battles. He held the sword again, and it seemed as if the sword had become one with him. Looking at the panel and feeling the effect of the skill, Gavin thought, "With the panel, I can learn almost any skill quickly, but it's hard to get energy points." After finishing all these complicated thoughts, Gavin fell into a deep sleep with exhaustion all over his body. Time flies, and soon it is the 291st year of the Aegon calendar. On the training ground, a young man stood there holding a sword. His silver-gold hair shone in the sun. His handsome face had a pair of deep and bright purple eyes. He stood tall and held a training sword. It was Gavin, who was already 14 years old. He was standing opposite Coach Ryan. Both of them had firm and focused eyes. "Gavin, let me see how much you've improved over the years." Coach Ryan shouted and took the lead in attacking. Chapter 9. Studying in the Academy. Gavin dodged Ryan's sword move easily by moving sideways, and then he lunged at Ryan with lightning speed. Ryan tried to parry, but it was too late. With just 2 moves, Gavin knocked Coach Ryan's sword away. Gavin placed his sword on Ryan's neck and said with a smile, "Coach Ryan, you lose." Coach Ryan was stunned at first, then he burst into laughter, "Good boy, you are really better than your teacher." Gavin put away his sword and saluted respectfully to the coach, "Coach Ryan, this is all thanks to your many years of teaching." At this time, Sir Edmund came over with a smile on his face and eyes full of admiration, Gavin, you have grown and improved rapidly. I was right about you. Gavin quickly bowed respectfully and said, Sir, thank you for your help and training. Sir Edmund patted Gavin on the shoulder and said, My child, I have witnessed your growth with my own eyes. But remember, a true knight must not only have superb swordsmanship, but also noble character and firm beliefs. Gavin nodded heavily, Sir, I understand. Sir Edmund looked at Gavin's familiar face with a bit of nostalgia in his eyes. Gavin in front of him reminded Edmund of his brother Morton Codoin. Except for the different hair color, the similar face seemed to make his elder brother come alive again. Sir Edmund calmed down and said, Gavin, with your ability, I want you to go to the Tyrell family or the Redwine family to be a knight's squire. Do you want to go? Of course, I suggest the Tyrell family. It will be of great benefit to your future development. Gavin bowed his head slightly, looking embarrassed, and said, Thank you for your kindness, sir. I want to go to the Citadel to study for a while, so I hope you can put this matter on hold for now. Sir Edmund was quite surprised, studying in the Citadel? My child, scholars cannot pursue glory and must give up their own surnames. Gavin said sincerely, Sir, my desire for knowledge is no less than that for glory. Besides, it is okay to just study without taking the oath to become a maester. Sir Edmund looked at Gavin for a long time and said, If you insist, I can write you a letter of recommendation. Gavin bowed gratefully, Thank you, sir. Sir Edmund was a little surprised. After a moment's silence, he said, I am saddened by your mother's situation. Please accept my condolences. But Gavin, remember that you still have family. I have always regarded you as my nephew. Gavin raised his head, tears in his eyes, and looked at Edmund with great emotion. He said, Thank you for your concern, sir. My mother will be very happy when she knows about this. I have always regarded you as my relative. After Gavin said goodbye to Sir Edmund and Coach Ryan, since he had just talked about his mother, he thought about going for a walk on the beach. He turned around with a slightly heavy heart and began to walk out of the castle. His steps were steady, but his memories were like flying catkins. In the past 8 years, Gavin's mother Alice's health has been getting worse and worse, like a bright lamp that is about to run out of fuel, the flame of life is swaying and may be extinguished at any time. Since Gavin travelled to this world, he has depended on his mother for life. In his heart, his mother Alice is his warmest and most solid support in this strange world. Although he was a time traveller, the love Alice gave him was pure and deep. It was the gentle comfort of countless nights, the warm embrace of every setback, and the meticulous care in life. This love was unreserved, like the spring breeze and the warm sunshine, which made him feel endless warmth and peace in this world full of unknowns and challenges. However, Alice's sickbed made Gavin's heart feel like being cut by thousands of sharp blades, and he suffered every minute and every second. He cried silently countless times in the dead of night, and prayed to the gods countless times to make his mother's condition better. But the cruel reality was like a cold shackle, tightly binding his hope. In the 7th year of his arrival at the castle, Gavin's mother died of illness. Gavin cremated his mother according to Belarus tradition. When the flames were lit, the raging fire devoured everything. Gavin stared at the burning flames intently, tears flashing in his eyes. He seemed to see his mother's gentle smile and caring eyes when she was alive, and memories flooded into his heart like a tide. The flames gradually died down, and the mother's figure disappeared with it. Gavin could no longer hold back his tears, and they flowed freely. But he knew that his mother would rest in peace in another world. Gavin stood there quietly, bidding farewell to his mother silently in his heart. After walking out of the castle, Gavin couldn't help but look up at the tall and majestic castle again. Many of the outer walls have been renovated. The originally modelled stone walls are now brand new, solid and majestic. The newly replaced crossbows shine coldly in the sun, showing an inviolable power. Even the bumpy roads on weekdays have been simply repaired and become flat and smooth. The strength of the territory has been significantly enhanced during this period, all thanks to the salt-making method contributed by Gavin. The Codoin family obtained a large number of gold dragons through this, which led to the territory's military becoming increasingly powerful. The year before last, the Codoin family responded to the king's call and participated in the suppression of the rebellion in the Iron Islands. In that war, Edmund Codoin finally won glory and wealth by relying on the powerful family's strength. After the war, the family reaped great rewards, not only obtaining a large amount of treasure, but also improving the family's status in the kingdom. Prime Minister Jonaran personally came forward to decide the ownership of two disputed villages on the border between the Courtoin and the Hightower families. Jonaran obviously intended to maintain the conflict, and gave one village to the Courtoin family, while leaving the other unresolved, causing the two families to continue to clash. Upon hearing the news, Gavin silently complained about the Prime Minister's cunning. Moreover, because of the powerful attack on the Iron Islands, the Ironman raids and looting incidents that once frightened the people along the coast no longer occurred. Even in a small port next to the town, there were 3 pirate ships captured from the Iron Islands parked neatly, a mighty sailing ship, and 2 narrow longboats. They were quietly moored there, as if telling of past battles and victories. Host, Gavin Budhog, 14 Bloodline Blood and Fire Dragonborn, Development 29% The bloodline of the Dragon King of Valeria, able to ride dragons and control fire, has just begun to awaken. Domination 29. Your followers can be upgraded through the panel. Skill High Valyrian, Proficient. Fire Manipulation, Mastery. Swordplay, Master Bow, Mastery. Spear, Proficiency. Energy Points, 2, obtained by automatically absorbing the magic power floating around, or actively absorbing the magic power. Chapter 10. Old Town. Still on the salt-making beach, Gavin stared at the data on the panel in front of him. Basically, he could absorb a little energy points naturally every year. In recent years, he seldom used energy points to improve his bloodline, but as he grew older, his bloodline awakening was still growing. However, Gavin could clearly feel that the speed of his bloodline awakening had slowed down. He was afraid that in a few years, he would have to rely on energy points to improve it. Most of the energy points consumed were used to improve martial arts, and his swordsmanship was even improved to the master level. Moreover, through years of training and bloodline growth, his physical fitness had improved significantly. Looking at the energy points reserved on the panel, he began to plan his future carefully. When going to the Citadel, Gavin had a clear goal in mind. One was the magic books collected in the Citadel. He had magic power, but it was difficult for him to form strength. Perhaps those books could solve his dilemma. The other target was the Maester Qyburn, who would be expelled from the Citadel in the future. The source of this idea had to start with the command function in his panel. 2 years ago, the family participated in the war against the Iron Islands, and Sir Edmund took most of the soldiers in the territory. The young men trained by Coach Ryan were organized into a small team, and they took on the task of patrolling the territory together with some militia. Gavin was the strongest among them, and was appointed as one of the captains. At that time, he was full of confidence and expectation, and he could test his leadership ability. He had intended to use the command function to enhance the abilities of his teammates, but the result was disappointing. The command in the panel only showed the names of his subordinates, followed by a prompt, "This unit does not belong to you." No matter how he tried, the command was like a sleeping beast, with no response. This made Gavin fall into deep thought and doubt. He carefully analyzed various possible reasons, and finally suspected that it was because these people could not truly swear allegiance to him, or whether the people being ruled also had to possess magic power to be recognized by the panel. But at present, these ideas could not be realized. After all, with his current status, it was almost impossible to obtain a title or become a knight in a short period of time. Under such circumstances, it was even more unattainable to make these soldiers follow him wholeheartedly and test his command function. Gavin, who had been confused for a long time, finally decided to change his mind. If the living could not pledge allegiance to him, then what about the dead? This bold and crazy idea kept lingering in his mind. Recalling that in the play, Coban resurrected the mountain, making him a terrifying existence that almost lost himself and only knew to obey orders. Although the mountain seemed to have regained some of his self, or obsession, this undoubtedly provided Gavin with a direction to solve the problem. Gavin pondered this possibility over and over again, and the more he thought about it, the more he felt that this might be the key to breaking the current dilemma. If he could master the ability to resurrect the dead and let those dead warriors serve him again, then he would no longer have to worry about the loyalty of the soldiers. They would execute his orders without reservation and become the most loyal and powerful force in his hands. This idea made Gavin excited, but also a little scared. After all, this was a method that went against common sense and morality. But facing the current dilemma, Gavin felt that he didn't have much choice. He gritted his teeth and secretly made up his mind to find ways to obtain Coban's knowledge. Gavin followed the caravan and slowly set out on the road to Old Town. Along the way, the beautiful scenery of the river bend slowly unfolded before his eyes like a colorful painting. Looking around, the vast expanse of farmland was like a green ocean, swaying gently in the breeze. The crops in the fields were lush and full of vitality, demonstrating the fertility and abundance of the land. 5 days later, in the evening, Gavin arrived at the old town. The towering tower that soared into the sky also appeared in his sight. It was more than 100 meters high. For Gavin in his previous life, such a height might not be surprising, but this was the backward Middle Ages. Legend has it that the construction of the towering tower was aided by magic, and now it seems that these legends are not groundless. Gavin's thoughts began to wander uncontrollably as he looked at the tower with mysterious and magnificent patterns. A crazy idea suddenly popped up in his mind: if this towering tower was really built with the power of magic, then does it contain mysterious magic? If he could touch its tower with his own hands, would he have a chance to obtain precious energy points? Once this idea appeared, it spread like wild grass in his mind. However, just a moment later, Gavin smiled helplessly. He knew that with his current status and position, it was simply a pipe dream to get close to the castle of the Hightower family and the mysterious towering tower. However, the fact that it was impossible to achieve it now did not mean that it was impossible in the future. Sooner or later, it would be sucked dry. Gavin looked at the towering tower with full of expectations. Gavin soon calmed down. He led his horse and walked slowly along the streets of the old town, looking for a place to rest. Soon, he found a hotel that looked quite comfortable. After entering the hotel, Gavin found a quiet corner and sat down. He was exhausted from the long journey. He waved to the waiter and said in a slightly hoarse voice, "Give me a clean room and prepare some food and water." The waiter responded and quickly arranged everything for Gavin. When the food was served, Gavin gave the waiter a few copper stars and ate it while wolfing down the food, asking the waiter about some things about the citadel. The next morning, Gavin got up early, had breakfast brought by the waiter, and went to the citadel to register with the letter of recommendation given by Sir Edmund. Along the way, many people around him looked at him. After all, in Westeros, silver hair and purple eyes are the symbol of the Targaryen family, the former owner of the Iron Throne. The management bachelor who received Gavin was also a little surprised by his appearance and specifically asked about Gavin's background. After all, the Iron Throne's attitude towards dragons was very bad at the moment, and although the citadel remained neutral, it did not want to cause trouble. The Bachelor of Management was relieved after reading the recommendation letter written by the noble, which introduced Gavin's identity in detail and proved it. Then, he led Gavin to the office and introduced as he walked: "You need to pay a tuition fee of 10 gold royals every year, and you can choose the subject you are interested in. But you can only choose one subject in the first year." Chapter 11, Qyburn's Test. After you have chosen your subject, I will arrange a bachelor of that subject as your mentor, and you will follow the bachelor as an apprentice. When you feel that you have learned enough, you can take the bachelor's exam. After passing the exam and forging the corresponding links, you can become a bachelor. The school city no longer charges tuition fees, and there will be corresponding subsidies every month. The specific amount of the subsidy depends on the number of chain links you build, and the subsidy varies depending on the number. Later, the bachelor introduced Gavin to many rules of the academy on the way, such as no drinking and no fighting, and those who violated the rules would be expelled from the academy. The two quickly walked to the empty office hall and began to register Gavin. Gavin touched the golden dragon in his pocket and felt reluctant, but he still reluctantly emptied out most of his assets and gave it to the Bachelor of Management. Over the years, Sir Edmund gave him some pocket money from time to time. He saved 30 gold royals by selling salt and his salary as a guard some time ago. This amount of money is already a lot. In Westeros, 2 silver deer are enough for a family of 3 to live for a month, and 1 gold dragon can be exchanged for 10 silver deer. The Bachelor of Management touched the extra gold dragon and smiled instantly. He said enthusiastically, "My name is Mishu, you can call me Bachelor Mishu. There are still many vacant dormitories. I will take the brochure and you can choose one by yourself. I will arrange it for you after you have made your choice. In addition, bachelor's students and apprentices need to ask for leave when they go out. If you want to go out in the future, just come to me directly. Have you decided which subject to choose? Do you want me to recommend one to you? I also know the situation of bachelor's degree in various disciplines." Gavin frowned slightly, thought for a while and said, "Master Mishu, I want to study medicine and magic research under Master Coban." Gavin took the opportunity to put forward his request. You have made a good choice. Maester Coburn has made great achievements in the field of medicine, and for the subject of magic research, I suggest you choose Maester Marwyn. Although most of the maesters in the Citadel do not believe in magic, it must be said that Maester Marwyn is second to none in this subject. The key is that apprentices can only choose one subject in the first year. I suggest you choose Maester Coburn. He also has some knowledge of magic research. It is generally believed in the Citadel that he will forge Valyrian steel links sooner or later. This way you can kill two birds with one stone. The Bachelor of Management recommended patiently with a smile. Thank you for recommending Bachelor Mishu. I will follow your advice and choose Bachelor Coburn to study medicine. Gavin said without hesitation. Maester Mithro shrugged. Okay, I'll arrange it for you. If you need help in the future, you can come to me. Gavin thanked him quickly, received his bachelor's gown, and walked towards the dormitory he had chosen with his luggage. In the dormitory, Gavin, who had just finished cleaning the room, lay on the bed, silently thinking about his plan. The school provided food and accommodation, but he really should consider making money. Selling technology directly would undoubtedly kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, and he had neither the startup capital nor the strength to protect the industry if he established his own industry. After a little thought, Gavin decided to go to the tournament. Every year, the Tyrell family would hold a tournament in the Reach. Of course, the prize money was not as high as the one held by Robert in the plot. The prize money for the first place in the Lance tournament was only 5,000 gold dragons, but to register, you had to be a knight at least. He, a bastard, could not participate. The first place in the group tournament and the archery tournament each had 2,000 gold dragons, but there was no limit on identity, and both could participate. Calculating the time, it would be held in 7 months. If it doesn't work, I can use some energy points to upgrade my bow and arrow to master, so that I can definitely get gold dragons. Gavin estimated his current level and found that his physical fitness barely surpassed that of most knights in their prime. After all, his body was only that of a 14-year-old, so there was still a lot of room for growth. But if it came to swordsmanship alone, Gavin was confident that he was definitely one of the best in West Eros. After all, his skills were not gained for nothing. After receiving the money, Bachelor Mishu arranged everything for Gavin the next day, and he officially became Coburn's apprentice. 5 months later, in the Citadel, in a slightly dim room, Gavin was concentrating on treating the wound of a veteran with a broken arm. The veteran gritted his teeth, enduring the pain, and sweat dripped down his face. Gavin's eyes were firm and focused, and the tools in his hands seemed to have life in his hands. He skillfully used tweezers to pick out the black and rotten meat, and every movement was precise and neat, without the slightest hesitation or deviation. Bachelor Coburn stood aside, closely following Gavin's every move, with an expression of admiration gradually emerging on his face, his eyes full of appreciation and surprise. He could not help but nodded and said, "Gavin, your performance is getting better and better. With your current level, you can create a silver link in medicine." Gavin kept moving his hands, and when he heard Bachelor Coburn's praise, he humbly responded, "It's all thanks to your good teaching, Bachelor. I still have a lot to learn." After saying this, he had a sincere smile on his face. After the operation, Gavin carefully bandaged the old soldier's wound. Maester Coburn walked over, checked it again, and said with satisfaction, "Not bad, very well done. Clean up and follow me to see the other injured." The two walked out of the room, the sun shining on them. As they walked, Maester Coburn imparted more experience and skills to Gavin. Gavin listened carefully, and from time to time raised his own questions and opinions using the insights and knowledge of his previous life. Maester Coburn praised his thinking ability and his face was full of satisfaction. As the days passed, Gavin made rapid progress under the guidance of Bachelor Coburn and the help of the panel. Gradually, Coburn began to regard Gavin as a partner with whom he could conduct academic research rather than an apprentice. Gavin's insights often made Coburn suddenly enlightened, and many problems that had troubled him for a long time were also solved by Gavin's flash of inspiration. Coburn even had the idea of letting this outstanding apprentice participate in his private research, but these studies were not tolerated by the Citadel, so he did not dare to invite Gavin rashly. But now he had been troubled for too long, and had no choice but to test Gavin many times. Gavin, who felt the temptation, also expressed his views on medicine many times, and also approved and catered to some of Coburn's experimental conjectures on combining magic with medicine, especially in terms of human experiments. Gavin did not show any resistance and even provided a lot of suggestions for this. In Coben's study, Gavin and Coben were discussing medical knowledge. Coben kept complaining about the inaccuracy of the human anatomy diagrams, and proposed to the Citadel many times to restart relevant research on the human body, but the Citadel rejected his proposal every time. Chapter 12. Navigation Chart. Mr. Coben, I quite agree with your point of view. I have an idea that our understanding of the human body is not comprehensive enough. If we don't understand it, there will be deviations in treatment. So I think the advancement of medicine is not only about researching new drugs, but also about understanding the human body. This is the foundation of everything. Gavin had a fanatical look on his face, as if he could do anything for medicine. Gavin, your idea is exactly what is currently ignored in medicine. However, this type of research is expressly prohibited by the Citadel. Under the general trend, we can only work hard in the two areas of drugs and methods. Coben frowned and said helplessly. What if the Citadel doesn't know? Maester? We are doing this for academic research and medical advancement. If there are great results, everyone will benefit. Gavin said eagerly, his eyes shining with excitement. Gavin, your idea is very dangerous. You are still young, so you should accumulate more knowledge and experience. You can study more theories in this area. I believe that the Academy will change slowly. Don't delay your future. Without waiting for Gavin to reply, Coben said again, waving his hand. That's all for today. I still have some medication to deal with. I have a surgery tomorrow, so remember to get there early. Go back, Gavin. Gavin bowed respectfully and said respectfully, Yes, Maester, I won't disturb you from your work. See you tomorrow. After coming out, Gavin closed the door respectfully, rolled his eyes, and complained in his heart, Old fox, you want me to help but you dare not say it. You have been testing me repeatedly for more than 10 days. Gavin did not dare to show too much. It would be more troublesome if he really scared Coben away. In fact, in the past few months, Gavin has already mastered some of the dark materials about Coben secretly using corpses for experiments, but the evidence is not sufficient. Otherwise, he could threaten me directly, which is much better than acting here every day. Gavin returned to the dormitory, changed out of his solemn bachelor's suit, carefully tied his sword around his waist, and slowly walked towards the old town. Old John's tavern was bustling with people of all kinds. Most of the customers here were mercenaries and pirates traveling to the old town port, and their identities could change randomly. The air in the tavern was filled with the smell of beer and sweat. Gavin followed the waiter into the private room and saw 5 people sitting inside. Judging from their attire, they were all hired mercenaries from the passing ships. They were drinking beer with a smile on their faces. The leader was tall and had a hatchet on the table. Seeing this feature, Gavin knew that this was the captain of the mercenary team, Domus San. He was wearing a somewhat worn leather armor, the scratches on it seemed to tell the story of past battles. His muscular arms were exposed, with veins bulging like winding earthworms. The blade of the hatchet flashed a cold light under the light. Gavin took a deep breath, walked forward, and said with a smile, I guess you are Captain Domus, I am Gavin Flowers. Domus smiled cheerfully and said, You must be Gavin, come and sit down. Thank you for healing my teammate. I thank you on behalf of Luca. Gavin nodded and smiled, then walked quickly to his seat and sat down. Gavin had treated a mercenary named Luca a month ago. During the conversation, Gavin heard John tell him that a year ago, his team was hired by the Sea King of Bravus to explore the mysterious ruins of Valeria. Although the operation suffered heavy casualties, they were lucky to find a channel to enter. For this purpose, their captain Domus secretly drew a simple channel map. Gavin showed great interest in this and offered to pay 5 gold royals for a copy. Gavin came here today to complete the deal. At this time, a sturdy mercenary with a long scar on his face put down the beer in his hand, glanced at Gavin and said, I heard that you cured Luca, but the navigation map is a precious thing. Considering that you cured Tom, I will give you 10 gold royals. His voice was rough and his eyes were provocative, like a beast ready to pounce on its prey, trying to test Gavin's strength. Gavin did not answer. He glanced at Domus first and saw that he was pretending to be indifferent. Obviously, this was what Domus meant. Gavin could accept this price, so he smiled and agreed, okay, then 10 gold royals. The mercenary with the long scar smiled disdainfully after hearing this, I changed my mind and gave you 20 gold royals. Hearing this, Gavin unconsciously clenched the sword at his waist with his left hand, and said with great restraint, it seems that you have no sincerity in the transaction. After hearing this, the other party showed a contemptuous smile on his face, glanced at Ji Wen, and laughed arrogantly. Boy, you want to use the sword? Why don't you come out and compete with me? If you beat me, I will give you 1 gold royal. Of course, if you lose, you must pay 40 gold royals to buy it. After hearing this, Gavin said disdainfully, no need to go out, just stay here, I'll let you make a move, you make the first move. Feeling humiliated, the mercenary immediately drew the sword from his waist and stabbed Gavin with a roar. However, in a split second, Gavin's sword was faster, and with a clang sound, his sword was swept away. Before the mercenary could react, a blood mark was left on the back of his hand. Then, Gavin's sword was like lightning and was placed on his neck before he could react. The room fell silent instantly, and the other mercenaries stared with eyes wide open, their faces full of disbelief. The defeated scar-faced mercenary blushed, feeling embarrassed and annoyed, but helpless. Gavin smiled slightly, took out a gold dragon and threw it on the table, slowly retracted the sword, and said, "Thank you." The mercenary gritted his teeth and said, "I was wrong. Your swordsmanship is amazing." Domus then laughed and tried to smooth things over, "So, I told you this guy has some skills." Everyone laughed too, and the atmosphere became lively again. As night fell, Gavin, who had just finished copying the navigation map, chose to stay overnight in the tavern. After all, the citadel had strict rules. If an assistant maester returned too late, he would definitely be reported by the guard. To prevent any unexpected incidents, staying overnight in the tavern was undoubtedly a wise choice. Just now, he successfully exchanged a gold dragon for the ownership of the route map before nightfall. Gavin also made a simple friend with Domus. Through chatting, Gavin found that this team of people could flexibly transform between bandits and mercenaries. Gavin also specifically inquired about the situation in the ruins of Valeria and the Sea of Smoke, and unexpectedly learned a lot about the division of pirate forces on the Narrow Sea, the wars between the 9 major trading city-states, and some interesting things on the continent of Essos. Chapter 13. Blood Witchcraft. I even heard news about the Targaryen brother and sister who were in exile on the other side of the river. I heard that William Derry, who had protected them, had died, and now the two were forced to wander in Bravos. Some nobles even offered a reward for the exiled Princess Daenerys, but it was difficult to do so because they were guests of the Sea King of Bravos. There will definitely be contact in the future. Gavin is also planning how to get the dragon egg that Daenerys should have gotten, but I don't know whether the dragon egg is in Illyrio's hands yet. Gavin, who had no suitable plan yet, lay on the slightly crude and hard bed in the tavern room, his thoughts in a mess. He wondered if he changed the plot, would the Night King, who didn't get the dragon, be able to break through the Great Wall? His biggest advantage now was his foresight of the future plot. If he wanted to change the plot, he had to be cautious. He also thought about the upcoming tournament. He knew very well that this was an extremely rare opportunity that would allow him to fully demonstrate his own strength and potentially earn him a considerable fortune. Unfortunately, it was difficult to get a promotion in status through the tournament. The nobles of Westeros tacitly blocked the path to class advancement and were always on guard against commoners and illegitimate children. Relatively speaking, illegitimate children were not so bad. Some of them could be recognized and helped by their families to become knights, but only a very small number could obtain the status of lords. Some were even regarded as a disgrace to the family and were never taken care of. Gavin's situation was relatively good. Although he met the harsh and indifferent Earl Horton Codoan, he also met Sir Edmund, who was full of kindness towards him. The other party really considered his future and arranged a path for him to become a knight. However, this time span might take more than 10 years. If he didn't have the panel, perhaps he would really follow the path arranged by Sir Edmund. The next morning, the warm sunlight playfully came in through the cracks in the window, gently caressing Gavin's cheek and slowly waking him up from his sleep. He rubbed his sleepy eyes in a daze, got up and washed up briefly, then hurried back to the academy, as he had another patient to treat today. Coben, who had just finished his work, took off his mask and called Gavin, "Gavin, when you are done, come to my study." Gavin bowed slightly and replied respectfully, "Okay, Bachelor Coben." But he muttered to himself, "I'm afraid this old fox is going to test me again. It's really endless." Although he thought so in his heart, Gavin's face did not show any dissatisfaction, and he still maintained a respectful expression. After a while, Gavin came to Cobain's study. He took a deep breath, calmed down, raised his hand, and knocked on the door gently. Knock knock knock, the knocking sound echoed in the quiet corridor. Come in. Coben's voice came from the room. Gavin gently pushed the door open and walked in. He saw Coben sitting at the desk, holding a few books in his hands, with a smile on his face, but there was a subtle hint of deep meaning in his eyes. Coben looked at Gavin and said gently, Gavin, I want you to learn more theoretical knowledge. These books are not supposed to be read by assistant bachelors, but I think with your level, you are not far from forging links. And I can see your enthusiasm and persistence in medical research. These books involve some in-depth knowledge related to the human body. You can take a look at them. As he spoke, he handed the book in his hand to Gavin, then Coben waved his hand and said, Take the book back and study it, but don't let others know. Remember to return the book after reading it. Coben still had that seemingly kind smile on his face, but his eyes were fixed on Gavin, as if he wanted to capture something from his reaction. Gavin quickly took the book with both hands, nodded solemnly and said, Thank you, Master. I will never let you down and will keep my mouth shut. Coben nodded slightly, then sat back in his chair and began to sort out other items on the table, no longer looking at him. Gavin hugged the book tightly in his hand, bowed to Coben again, then turned around carefully, quietly left the study, and quietly closed the door. After returning to the dormitory, Gavin was like a hungry beast that saw its prey, and he couldn't wait to study these books. He spread the books one by one on the table, and his eyes shuttled between the pages eagerly and attentively. After a quick glance at a few books, I found that 2 of them were about the mysterious blood wizard's exploration and research on the human body, as well as detailed descriptions of all kinds of horrifying evil witchcraft. Moreover, he found that there were many annotations and questions added later in the book. The handwriting was neat and the insights were unique. He couldn't help but suspect that these were written by Coben and the questions were set for him. In the following 3 days, Gavin almost completely shut himself off in this small world of research. He forgot the passage of time, ignored the noise of the outside world, and immersed himself in the obscure but tempting knowledge in the book. He ate only simple dry food and light fruits every day, and slept only briefly when he was extremely sleepy. Finally, at nightfall on the 3rd day, Gavin's tired, bloodshot eyes revealed a hint of relief and excitement. After all this hard research, he had come to a preliminary conclusion. The book records in detail the blood magic that several blood wizards use to curse others, repair their own body functions, and even temporarily strengthen their bodies. It also contains some scattered knowledge about blood wizards. However, there is a fundamental condition for performing all these magics, which requires the blood wizard's unique bloodline as support, just like his own blood and fire dragon bloodline that merges with the fire wizard. He had read about the history of the Belaris family. Among the 40 Dragon King families, another Upper Dragon King family controlled blood witchcraft. Their family bloodline had been passed down from generation to generation, and always retained the special abilities of blood wizards. This ability inheritance was quite similar to the fire wizards inherited by the Belaris family in some aspects, and both relied on blood ties to maintain. But the ability was even more sinister, evil, and unpredictable. Carefully considering the contents recorded in the historical biography of the Belaris family, it is clear that among the 40 Dragon King families, the upper families, in addition to possessing the ability to control dragons, can also control some other extraordinary abilities for a long time. It is precisely because of these that these high-ranking families can effectively suppress most of the Dragon King families. Chapter 14. Blood Witch Puppet Ritual. Among all the complicated and confusing blood witchcraft knowledge, there is only one ritual called Blood Witch Puppet that can be used without being restricted by the blood of the blood wizard. Based on the effect described by this ritual, Gavin secretly guessed that this should be the method that Coben will use to revive the mountain in the future. According to the book, first, you need to find a fresh corpse, which must be intact, with minimal damage to the muscles and bones. Then, on the skin of the corpse, you need to carefully draw a series of mysterious and complex runes with special materials. These runes have mysterious magic and can guide the subsequent injection of power. The next step is to introduce special drugs and carefully inject them into various parts of the body to ensure that the drugs are evenly distributed and change the environment inside the body. After this, the most critical moment comes. The blood and medicine containing magic power need to be slowly and steadily injected into the blood vessels of the corpse to gradually replace the original blood. During this process, there are strict requirements on the injection speed, quantity, and location of each drop of blood. Any carelessness may lead to the failure of the ceremony. However, this witchcraft is not a very powerful one in the records of blood wizards. In most cases, it is a way for blood wizards to create their own servants. Because the puppet's strength and level are limited by its state before death, and if magic power is not regularly injected into the puppet's body, it will be difficult to maintain the puppet. The content of the ceremony is extremely complicated, and the most critical part is to inject magical blood and special medicine into the corpse to replace the corpse's own blood. This step requires extreme precision and caution. Any slight deviation may lead to the failure of the ritual. This is easy for blood wizards who can control blood, but it is the biggest problem for others. Suddenly, Gavin became interested. Apparently, Coben had overcome these problems in the future. After all, no matter how he looked at it, he didn't think Coben had magic power himself, and the best source of blood containing magic power to be injected into the blood was the master who controlled the puppet. In this way, once the blood witch puppet was resurrected, it would be completely loyal to its master, obey the master's orders, and completely lose itself. From this point of view, it is obvious that Qyburn's transformation of the mountain did not meet the requirements of the blood witch puppet. Because at the last moment, the mountain had an uncontrollable obsession in his heart and chose to refuse to obey orders. Gavin looked at the list of materials and medicines for the ritual with a focused expression, his eyes moving slowly over the densely packed lines. His brows knitted slightly, because among the numerous items, he could only identify a portion of them. However, just the materials and medicines he knew about, each of them exuded an expensive and rare atmosphere. Some of those herbs only grew on cliffs or deep and mysterious ancient forests where few people went. Those strange minerals required a lot of manpower and time to dig out from deep underground. Fortunately, if you are willing to spend money, you can buy them. Gavin made inferences based on his past experience and knowledge, and the more he thought about it, the more frightened he became. He shook his head slowly, and secretly guessed that the cost of making a blood witch puppet would probably not be less than 1,000 gold royals, which was undoubtedly a staggeringly huge expense. Gavin smacked his lips, frowning, thinking of the prize money from the martial arts competition that he had not yet received. Even if the prize money could arrive as expected and fall into his pocket smoothly, after careful calculation, he estimated that he could only barely make 4 blood witch puppets. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but sigh, his heart full of helplessness and emotion. Making money is always the primary problem at present, and in the future, this will probably be a serious problem that I will continue to face. Fortunately, if his guess is correct, the mysterious panel ability can greatly enhance the strength of the flesh puppet and completely free it from the constraints and influence of its strength in life. This means that even a corpse with mediocre strength in life can become an extremely powerful existence through the blessing of this mysterious power. The more Gavin thought about it, the more excited he became. However, he couldn't help but worry about the road ahead. If I want to use this method to form an undead army, the road ahead is really long and arduous. Gavin himself actually has many product ideas that can bring huge wealth. However, every time he thinks about putting them into practice, he feels a deep sense of powerlessness. He knew very well that with his current strength and status, he was unable to effectively protect the rights and interests of these commodities. Once these commodities show huge profit potential, they will inevitably attract countless greedy wolves to devour them like fresh fat meat. Those powerful people would never miss any opportunity to plunder, and he was completely powerless in front of them. He was already considering forming a partnership with powerful people. The next day, Gavin came to Coben's study again with those precious books in his arms. He calmed himself down and gently knocked on the door. Knock knock knock. There was a knock on the door in the quiet corridor. Come in. Coben's voice came from inside the house. Gavin pushed open the door and stepped into the study. With a polite and humble smile on his face, he bowed slightly to Coburn and said, Master Coburn, thank you for lending me these books. Coburn smiled and nodded, then asked, So how do you understand the contents of the book? Gavin walked to the desk and began to explain his views in an orderly manner. The two discussed in depth the various issues in the book, and the atmosphere was warm and focused. Gavin's ideas and thoughts, with his knowledge far beyond this world and his magical feelings and understanding, really surprised Cobain. This undoubtedly solved the problems that had troubled him for a long time. The two talked for a long time. Gavin leaned forward slightly, with a hint of expectation and earnestness in his eyes, and said to Coben, Bachelor Coben, this communication with you has benefited me a lot. I sincerely hope that with the help of your status as a bachelor, I will have the opportunity to read more similar magic books and further broaden my horizons and knowledge. Is that okay with you? Gavin rubbed his hands lightly and consciously, showing his inner nervousness and desire. Coben leaned back in his chair, looked at Gavin with scrutiny, tapped the table lightly with his fingers, and said after thinking for a moment, "Gavin, this is not a trivial matter. Most of those books are precious and secret, and only scholars can borrow them. But it is not impossible for you to read them, but you must promise to keep the secrets strictly." Coben's expression was serious and solemn. Chapter 15. Flame Blade. Gavin straightened up quickly, nodded solemnly, and said with a firm look in his eyes, "Mr. Coben, don't worry. I swear on my honor that I will never reveal a single word. I just want knowledge, and I want to have a deeper attainment in the field of academia, and make more contributions to your research and ours." Coben narrowed his eyes slightly, looked at Gavin again, and then said slowly, "Okay, since you are so determined and sincere, I will agree to your request. But you must remember that if there is any mistake, you know the consequences." Gavin's face flushed with excitement. He bowed again and said, "Thank you, Maester Coburn, for your trust and support. I will definitely not let you down." Coben waved his hand and said, "Go ahead, come to me tomorrow and I'll make arrangements for you." Gavin responded happily, "Yes, Bachelor Coben, I'll take my leave now." After that, Gavin turned around and left the study with brisk steps. During the period that followed, Gavin devoted himself to the vast amount of magical knowledge that Coburn had given him. This knowledge covered a wide range of areas, including pyromancers, blood wizards, shadow binders, moon singers, etc., although most of this knowledge was severely incomplete, and some even had only a simple introduction. Gavin was still like a hungry fledgling, desperately absorbing the nutrients of knowledge. He studied day and night, not missing any subtle knowledge points, and the scope of knowledge was broad and complex. In these books, Gavin was also pleasantly surprised to discover a spell-casting ability of the pyromancer, and luckily gained the approval of the panel. In those precious books that specifically describe fire magicians, Gavin saw several amazingly powerful magics. One of them, called Flame Demon, particularly fascinated him. According to the book, after casting this magic, the body can be completely transformed into a blazing flame, and when it changes back to flesh from the flame form, all the injuries suffered by the body before will be magically healed. In Gavin's understanding, this is like making the body completely elemental and possessing the magical ability of immortality. It was very similar to the ability of the dragon Belleris in the records. Unfortunately, the powerful Balrog only had a brief introduction. The only skill that he could truly master was the flame blade, which allowed him to attach blazing magical flames to his weapon, increasing his attack power. However, he also acquired some very useful fire magician skills such as flame condensation. These skills can condense the flame to almost achieve a physical effect, or more easily change the shape of the flame. In addition, there is a potion formula that can be used for quick treatment. The materials are not scarce, but you need to add blood-containing magic power into the potion. The stronger the magic power, the better the effect. This may be the biggest problem faced by others, but it is easy for Gavin, because his own blood contains magic power. At the same time, Coben also made breakthrough progress in his own research field, especially the ritual of the Blood Witch puppet. The lack of magic power and the problem of replacing blood have always troubled him deeply. Now, through communication with Gavin, he finally found a clever solution. His new idea was no longer to rely on the corpse recorded in the ritual, but to boldly choose a dying person. This person's life state was delicately between life and death. He could accept the death magic that could only be engraved on the corpse at the moment of life's fading, and when there was still a glimmer of life, he could use the natural flow of blood in his body and a dropper device invented by Gavin to successfully replace the special blood. Although this innovative method reduced the powerful effect that the flesh and blood puppet should have had to a certain extent, it also brought significant advantages, because the puppet was not completely dead and there was no need to regularly refill the puppet with magic power. Gavin told him that his idea was based on the method used by Qyburn to revive the mountain in the original plot. The mountain was not completely dead at the time, but was poisoned by the Red Viper and was on the verge of death. Qyburn successfully resurrected him with this unique method. However, Coben, who had an idea, was cautious not to tell Gavin, and planned to try it after Gavin left. Both sides tacitly regarded these exchanges as academic explorations. Busy time always goes by quickly. Gavin, who was immersed in research, received the news of the tournament. High Court has officially announced to the Reach that the tournament will be held at the beginning of next month. This event is not only to show the style of the Knights of the Reach, but also to celebrate the 13th name day of Marjorie Tyrrell, the daughter of the Duke of Mace. Gavin had to stop his research, put down his books and notes reluctantly, asked for leave from the Bachelor of Management, Mishu, and then set off for High Court. Host, Gavin Budhog, 15 Bloodline Blood and Fire Dragonborn, Development 32% The bloodline of the Dragon King of Valeria, able to ride dragons and control fire, has just begun to awaken. Domination 32, your followers can be upgraded through the panel. Skill Fire Manipulation, Master Swordplay, Master Flame Blade, Proficiency Bow, Mastery. Spear, Proficiency. Energy Points, 1, obtained by automatically absorbing the magic power floating around, or actively absorbing the magic power. Gavin looked at his attribute panel. His almost crazy research on magic during this period was finally not in vain. His bloodline development had reached 32%. Not only that, those various techniques of controlling fire directly pushed his fire control to the master level. Gavin could already ignite a barrel-sized flame out of thin air and it would last for 30 minutes. And it can be compressed into any shape, so Gavin suddenly had an idea to condense the flame into an arrow and shoot it out with a bow. Although the bow was instantly scrapped and the range was reduced by half, the instantaneous explosion of the flaming arrow was no less powerful than a grenade in his previous life. What made Gavin most excited was that he finally mastered his first magic for attack. Although the effect of the flame blade was not satisfactory and could only last for 10 minutes, he tested it and found that the combination of the sword slashing and the magical flame burning brought by magic power actually produced extraordinary power. Even plate armor could be cut in half with one sword, and each time the sword was swung, a wave of hot fire would be formed. Unfortunately, the sword would be scrapped every time the flame blade was used. Gavin, whose wallet has shrunk greatly because of this, has been thinking about getting a Valyrian steel sword and a dragon bone bow in the future. Gavin boarded a merchant ship bound for Highgarden, and as the merchant ship set sail, it entered the Whispering Bay. The sea here was sparkling, and the sun shone on his body, bringing a touch of warmth. The breeze blew by, and Gavin felt relaxed and happy. Chapter 16. Arrival at Highgarden. After passing Whispering Bay, the merchant ship sailed eastwards and entered the Mandar River when it was about to reach the Shield Islands. The banks of the Mandar River were lined with dense forests and rolling hills, which were very beautiful. As the boat gradually approached Highgarden, the golden wheat waves swayed in the wind in the fields on both sides of the Mandar River, and the orchards were full of fruits, emitting an alluring aroma. Along the way, you can also see some small villages and farmlands, where people work in the fields and live a peaceful and tranquil life. Finally, the ship arrived at the inland port closest to Highgarden. The port was busy and bustling, with ships shuttling back and forth, loading and unloading goods. Looking at a white castle in the distance, this magnificent castle is located on a lush hill, like a shining pearl inlaid in the earth. The white walls are tall and solid, shining with warm light under the sunshine, as if they were carved from the purest jade. The towers are soaring into the clouds, and the spires pierce the blue sky elegantly, as if announcing its majesty and dignity to the world. Gavin couldn't help but sigh. Highgarden is indeed the most beautiful castle in the world of Game of Thrones. The well-arranged buildings, the exquisite carvings, and the harmonious layout are like a castle in a dream, a beautiful medieval scene, so vividly displayed before his eyes. Under the Highgarden castle, the tournament was held, making the place extremely lively, like a sea of joy. The crowds were bustling and noisy, colorful tents dotted the land like stars, merchants shouted at the top of their voices to sell a wide variety of goods, and the fragrance of spices and the aroma of grilled meat intertwined and filled the air. Jugglers tumbled and leaped in the air, winning rounds of applause, bards played their harps and sang ancient heroic legends, children played and frolicked among the crowd, their laughter ringing like silver bells. Gavin trudged through the bustling camp, only to find that there was no place to stay in the city. In desperation, he decided to find an open space in the wild, rent a tent, and set up a camp. The camp was crowded and bustling with people, and the sounds of hawking and laughter could be heard one after another. Suddenly, Gavin's eyes were attracted by a flag fluttering in the wind in the distance. It was a four-square flag with a noble family crest. On the upper left and lower right parts, there was a silver holy grail shining brightly on a black background, as if carrying endless glory and mystery. On the lower left and upper right parts, there was a gorgeous black rose on a yellow background, exuding a unique and charming charm. His eyes lit up instantly. He had seen this flag for more than 10 years. It was the familiar flag of the Codoan family. Gavin thought to himself, if Sir Edmund is here, I should go visit him. With this thought in mind, he walked briskly towards the camp under the flag. When he arrived at the camp gate, he found that the guard was actually his former subordinate Tommen. When Tommen saw him, his face was immediately filled with surprise, and he shouted excitedly, "Captain Gavin! I didn't expect you to be here. Didn't you go to the citadel to study?" Gavin smiled slightly, and said jokingly with a bit of ease and humor, "The citadel doesn't stipulate that assistant maesters can't participate in the competition." Tommen smiled and scratched his head after hearing this, his expression showing intimacy and familiarity. "By the way, Captain, Sir Edmund and Coach Ryan are here. Do you want to meet them?" Gavin's eyes flashed with anticipation, and he said without hesitation, "That's why I came here." "Tell me which tent it is." Raman quickly pointed to a place and said, "It's over there, Captain. You go in by yourself. I still need to guard it." Gavin nodded in thanks, patted Raman on the shoulder with concern, and then strode into the camp. Meanwhile, inside the tent, Sir Edmund looked solemn, crossed his arms, paced back and forth, and said, "If it doesn't work, I'll take over the justing. This justing is about the ownership of the last disputed village, and we must not lose." Ryan sat on the chair, leaning forward with a serious expression, "Sir, the strength of the Hightower family should not be underestimated. What if you are in danger? I have found 3 good players from the Essos continent to participate in the group competition. They have all been gladiators for more than 10 years and can win at least one event." Sir Edmund stopped walking, frowning. "What do you think of the choice of Archer?" Coach Ryan nodded slightly, his eyes firm, "Sir, I will personally go down, but I still do not recommend you to participate in the competition." Sir Edmund sighed and was about to say something when the guard outside the tent came in and reported Gavin's arrival. A hint of surprise flashed across Edmund's face, and he hurried out of the tent. Coach Ryan also stood up and followed him. Seeing Gavin standing outside the tent, Sir Edmund was very happy. He strode forward, hugged Gavin tightly, touched Gavin's head lovingly with his big hand, and said, "I haven't seen you for more than half a year. You have grown taller. Come in first." The speaker pulled Gavin into the tent. Sir Edmund pulled Gavin to sit down and asked anxiously, "Son, how are you doing in the citadel?" Gavin answered confidently, "My lord, I have learned a lot. If I didn't want to become a maester, I could have made chain links." Coach Ryan laughed and nodded, saying, "Gavin has always been an excellent kid." Suddenly, he seemed to remember something, turned to Edmund and said, "Sir, Gavin's archery level is far better than mine. Since Gavin is here, why not send Gavin to participate in the archery competition?" Sir Edmund was slightly startled, then turned his gaze to Gavin, and said with a bit of scrutiny and expectation, "Gavin, have you neglected your martial arts in the 6 months in the citadel?" Gavin bowed and replied respectfully, "Sir, I practice diligently every day and have never slacked off." Edmund nodded and said, "I would like to send you to represent the Kodoin family in this archery competition." Gavin did not answer after hearing this, but looked at Edmund and asked, "Sir, did something happen to you?" Coach Ryan next to him hurriedly told the story. After Coach Ryan's explanation, Gavin finally understood the whole story. It turned out that the Prime Minister's last ruling had resolved half of the issue between the Kodoin family and the Hightower family's disputed villages, but both families understood that the Prime Minister had deliberately left one village unresolved to create conflict. The two families, fearing that the Prime Minister would make a fuss about the matter again, negotiated for the first time. The two sides decided to use the ranking of the competition to determine the ownership of the disputed village. A best-of-3 system was adopted, with the winner of each round determined by the ranking of each team. Chapter 17. Test. After understanding the whole story, Gavin took the initiative to say to Edmund, "Sir, I can still participate in the group competition for you, and I am very confident in my ability. I want to participate in the competition and win for you to repay your help to me over the years." After hearing this, Edmund still had an anxious look on his face and firmly disagreed, "Gavin, no, the group competition is too dangerous, I can't let you take the risk." Coach Ryan beside him also tried to comfort him, "Gavin, I know your strength very well, but you are still too young and have no experience. Group competitions are too dangerous and cause countless deaths and injuries every year. I have hired 3 gladiators from Essos to participate, so I think there will be no problem." Gavin bowed solemnly to Edmund and Ryan, and said solemnly, "My lord, I am confident in my strength. I ask you to let me compete with these 3 gladiators. If I can defeat all 3 of them, Please allow me to participate in the competition. Edmund frowned, his expression full of hesitation. Gavin, this is not a joke. Coach Ryan also advised, Gavin, gladiators are not so easy to deal with. Unlike soldiers, they are very good at competition. Gavin smiled and looked straight into Edmund's eyes. My lord, please believe me, you will know after you give it a try. Edmund smiled bitterly and said, Okay, Ryan, go find those 3 people. Soon, 3 people came out of the tent. 2 of them were burly and muscular, like 2 iron towers. Their strong arms seemed to be able to break steel easily. They had stern faces and fierce and fearless eyes. The other one has a more agile figure, a light and flexible posture, smooth muscle lines without losing the sense of strength, and sharp and smart eyes, like a cheetah ready to catch prey at any time. Listening to Ryan's explanation, the burly gladiator who was the leader of the 3 was full of contempt and shouted at the top of his voice, I thought there was something going on, that you wanted me to come over and compete with a kid, but you are the employer, you have the final say. He turned to the other 2 and said, So, are you interested in bullying a kid? Without waiting for the 2 men to answer, Gavin, who was standing opposite, took the initiative to speak, I suggest that the 3 of you come together. If you fight alone, you may not be able to withstand even 2 moves. His words were full of calmness and his eyes flashed with confidence. When the burly man in the lead heard Gavin's words, he smiled grimly and said, It seems you are very confident, kid. Gavin just smiled, his expression still relaxed, I suggest that you 3 should take action first. As soon as these words came out, the 3 gladiators became furious. No one had ever looked down on them like this. Gavin's words were obviously insulting to them. The extremely agile gladiator instantly drew out the scimitar from his waist and attacked Gavin like a gust of wind. Gavin dodged the swift attack with ease. The gladiator missed the first blow and turned to swing his sword again. Gavin was not in a hurry. He turned sideways and lightly raised his sword to knock the scimitar to the ground. Seeing this, another burly gladiator swung a heavy axe at Gavin, and the axe wind whistled. Gavin jumped back and dodged cleverly. Then he took a step forward and stabbed out with his sword like lightning. The gladiator quickly blocked with his axe, but his arm was numb from the shock of Gavin's sword. The last gladiator joined the fight, holding a spear and stabbing at Gavin. Gavin moved flexibly to avoid the spear, then quickly got behind him and kicked him in the butt, causing him to stumble forward. Gavin saw the right moment and drew several graceful arcs with his sword in the air. As the sword shadows crossed, 3 gladiators fell to the ground one after another, and their weapons were scattered all over the ground. Gavin sheathed his sword, calm and composed, as if this battle was just an easy exercise for him. Most of the soldiers watching in the camp knew Gavin, and seeing how powerful Gavin was, they all cheered loudly for him. Edmund and Ryan, who were watching the battle, were also stunned, as they had never thought that Gavin was so strong. Coach Ryan smiled bitterly and said, Gavin, you seemed to be letting me down when you were sparring with me before. Edmund, who had increased Gavin's strength, seemed to have suddenly thought of something important, his expression tensed, and he interrupted, Gavin, how is your lance level? Gavin bowed and said respectfully, Sir, my lance skills are slightly inferior to my sword skills. Do you want me to participate in the lance competition? Then he added, Sir, as far as I know, I can't sign up for the lance competition. Edmund laughed, patted Gavin on the shoulder and said, These are all trivial matters. Generally speaking, only knights and noble children can participate in lance competitions. But if you represent a noble and are sent by a noble, you are not subject to this restriction. This news was undoubtedly a pleasant surprise for Gavin. His eyes instantly sparkled with excitement. After all, he had been eyeing the 5 gold royal prize for a long time, and there were many who were knighted by participating in the lance tournament. He was so excited that his voice trembled slightly, and he quickly volunteered, Sir, please send me to participate in the lance tournament as well. Edmund laughed heartily and agreed without hesitation. Then, he raised his voice and ordered loudly to the people around him, Come on, go and announce that I will hold a banquet in the camp to celebrate my nephew Gavin's return from the citadel. As soon as these words came out, everyone present showed surprise. You know, this was obviously the first time Edmund publicly acknowledged in front of everyone that Gavin was his nephew. A small banquet was being held in the big tent of the Codoan family's camp. Edmund was hugging Gavin with a happy smile on his face. Several nobles who had a good relationship with Edmund also came to participate and sat in the big tent chatting and laughing. At this time, the guard at the door announced loudly, Lord Willis Tyrrell of the Tyrrell family has arrived. Willis Tyrrell was slowly pushed in a wheelchair. Edmund quickly pulled Gavin up, put his arm around his shoulders and said affectionately, "Come on, I will take you to meet my good friend, the future Duke Tyrrell. He is the eldest son of the Duke of Mace and the heir of the Tyrrell family." Although Willis Tyrrell was disabled, he still had a noble temperament, with a gentle smile on his face, nodding to everyone. Edmund greeted him warmly and hugged him tightly. The joy of meeting old friends was beyond words. Then Edmund brought Gavin to Willis and introduced them to each other. Chapter 18, Unexpected Champion. Gavin politely saluted Willis and said, "Nice to meet you, Lord Willis, my name is Gavin Flowers." Willis also responded with a smile, "I've heard Edmund talk about you before. I didn't expect that you have such extraordinary swordsmanship at such a young age." With that, the three of them walked into the banquet together. At the banquet, Gavin and Vilas sat next to each other. Vilas talked to Gavin just out of politeness at first, but as the conversation deepened, the two chatted more and more happily. Vilas was surprised to find that although Gavin was young, he spoke maturely and steadily. Whether it is the analysis of current affairs or the insight into human nature, Gavin can always come up with novel and unique insights, as if there is a treasure trove of wisdom hidden in his mind. Especially when it comes to the issue of territorial development, the solutions proposed are both pragmatic and forward-looking. Vilas looked at Gavin, his eyes full of admiration and praise. Gavin's clear logic and unique insights impressed Vilas. Every point Gavin expounds is clear and well-reasoned, which makes his words seem to have an invisible magic that can make people immersed in it involuntarily. Willis thought secretly in his heart, this person is really a rare talent. If he can be brought to the Tyrrell family, he will definitely add a strong force to the family. It's a pity that he is an illegitimate child. Willis's mind began to work rapidly, thinking about what method he should use to impress Edmund so as to poach him from his good friend. The banquet soon came to an end. Before leaving, Willis invited Edmund and Gavin, saying, "After the archery and group competitions, the castle will hold a banquet to celebrate my sister's 13th name day. Edmund, remember to bring Gavin along." Edmund agreed with a smile. In the spacious and independent tent, Gavin was carefully cleaning his equipment. Sir Edmund had specially prepared a well-made hard bow for him. At this time, Tommen gently lifted the curtain of the tent and walked in. "Captain, I've found out," Tommen said. Gavin stopped what he was doing and looked up at him. "What do you mean?" "The odds of you winning the archery competition are 1 to 10. If it's a team competition, the odds are 1 to 10, and if you are the only winner, the odds can be up to 1 to 20. Tommen finished speaking in one breath, with a complicated expression on his face, showing both surprise at the high odds and concern about Gavin's prospects in the competition. Without waiting for Gavin to speak, Tommen hurriedly said, "Captain, do you really want to vote for us all?" Gavin said without hesitation, "Vote." Tommen frowned and said with difficulty, "But, Captain, this risk is too great." "If," Gavin interrupted him, "there is no if, risks and opportunities coexist, I have confidence." Tommen looked at Gavin's determined expression and gritted his teeth. "Okay, Captain, I'll listen to you. Besides, the brothers will also spend all their wealth to support you." Gavin patted Tommen on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry, I won't let you down." Tommen nodded and turned to arrange the betting. Gavin continued to organize his equipment, his eyes full of confidence. This time, participating in the tournament for the family, no matter what the result is, there are risks. Sir Edmund specially gave Gavin 1,000 gold dragons as a reward for his participation in the battle for the family. Gavin, who happened to hear about the gambling, did not hesitate to ask Tommen to inquire about it, and invested all the money on himself in order to double his wealth. At this time, Gavin has made full preparations, and is only waiting for the moment of the competition to come so that his wealth can increase significantly. There was a large open space in front of the high garden. The sunlight shone on the open space, outlining a golden color. This was where the archery competition was held. Under the castle, a huge stand was erected, like a towering mountain. On the stand, nobles dressed in gorgeous clothes were chatting elegantly or gazing at the field below with interest. The rules of the competition are clear and explicit. The contestants first face a target 100 steps away, and each has 5 chances to shoot. If the contestant hits all the targets, the target will move back 5 steps, and the target will be reduced in size, and this will repeat until the last contestant is the champion. "Ready to shoot." The referee's voice sounded like a loud bell. Gavin stood on the field, listening to the referee's instructions, bending his bow and shooting the arrow. His posture was as straight as a pine tree, his eyes were firm and focused. He was concentrating and calm, as if all the noise around him had nothing to do with him. His beautiful silver hair fell on his shoulders like a waterfall, shining with a charming luster under the sunlight. This silver hair complemented his handsome appearance and upright heroic posture, attracting the noble women in the stands. They asked each other about the identity of this player. Willis, who was also sitting in the stands, teased Edmund and said, "Haha, it seems that your nephew is very charming. Look at these ladies, they are all fascinated by him." Edmund couldn't help but show a proud look on his face when he heard it, and replied with a smile, "Of course, this is the blood of my family." As the competition progressed, Gavin's performance was amazing. Every time he pulled the bow, it was steady and powerful, and every arrow seemed to be given life and flew accurately to the target. By the 180th step, the target had turned into a cup-sized disc that was barely visible even to the naked eye. At this time, there were only 2 people left on the field, and Gavin was one of them. He took a deep breath and adjusted his breathing and rhythm. At this moment, Gavin was already feeling a little tired. If the winner could not be determined after reaching 200 steps, he might have to use the precious energy points he just got. Gavin held the bow tightly in his hand, staring at the distant and tiny target, with beads of sweat on his forehead. He silently calculated the distance and angle in his mind, thinking about how to complete this almost impossible challenge without using energy points. At this time, his opponent was also struggling, and his slightly trembling hands revealed his inner tension and anxiety. Suddenly, several girls in the stands shouted Gavin's name with red faces, and the shouts were like a wave. This behavior actually made the opponent's condition worse. The opponent's already tense nerves became even more fragile amidst the cheers, and his hands began to tremble uncontrollably, causing his arrow to miss the target. Gavin looked at his opponent's state, not knowing whether to laugh or cry, and thought to himself, "I never thought I would win the championship just by my looks." He shook his head helplessly, feeling a little helpless about this special help, but this did not affect the joy of winning the championship. Chapter 19. Plan. That night, Sir Edmund held another celebratory banquet in the camp to celebrate the Codoan family's victory in the archery tournament. Gavin, who was attending the banquet, was absent-minded, his eyes drifting towards the door from time to time. Until he saw Tommen pull aside the curtain and wave to him, he quickly apologized to Sir Edmund and hurried out. The 2 of them hurried all the way back to Gavin's tent. "Captain, we're rich," Tommen said excitedly, and as he spoke, he pulled out a leather bag from under the bed with great effort. Gavin opened it quickly. "How much is in here?" "The total amount is 13 gold royals." "You bet 000 gold royals," and the brothers chipped in and bet 1 gold royals together. Tommen said excitedly, his eyes full of excitement. "We are really going to make a fortune now. Go and ask the brothers to come to me to collect the money. Keep my share and divide the rest among you." After saying that, Gavin looked at Tommen, who was motionless, and asked, "What's wrong?" Tommen said, "The bad news is that your odds in the group competition have dropped." "How much?" Gavin had a bad feeling. Tommen quickly replied, 1:5, if you win the championship, then 1:10. "Not bad, not bad. I can barely accept it." Gavin thought to himself, and then said to Tommen, "After you receive the gold dragons, bet all my gold dragons and the prize money I just received on me to win the championship. As for whether you want to follow suit, make your own decision." "Captain, there's no need to divide. We've already discussed it and will continue to follow you in investing," Tommen said with a firm face. Gavin patted Tommen on the shoulder, smiled and said, "Okay, go ahead and do it. Believe me, it will definitely make everyone rich." Tommen nodded heavily, turned around and strode away to take care of the matter. Gavin looked at his back and silently calculated how much money he could make from this competition. He thought that he had found the money to build the Blood Witch puppet, but then he sighed again. Now the corpse became the top priority. He frowned and paced back and forth in the tent, constantly thinking about how to solve the problem of the source of corpses. The river bend has been peaceful for a long time. Where can he get enough corpses without arousing suspicion? How about going to the narrow sea or Essos to be a mercenary for a while? If you go, there are 2 benefits. First, the source of the corpses can be solved. There are many pirates on the narrow sea, and several city-states on the continent of Essos often confront each other. There are also Dothraki looting, and the situation is extremely chaotic. Second, the successfully made blood witch puppet would not arouse other people's suspicion and could be said to be a guard loyal to him brought back from the continent of Essos. The more Gavin thought about it, the more he felt that this plan was feasible, and he gradually made up his mind. But at the same time, he also knew that this long journey would inevitably be full of risks, but a strong desire still drove him to make up his mind to venture out. Gavin suppressed his complicated thoughts and hurried back to the banquet. After all, he was the protagonist of the banquet today, and it would be inappropriate if he left for too long. Perhaps he was too happy, and Edmund was already drunk. He was seen holding Sir Ryan with one hand, laughing non-stop, and it was unknown what interesting things they were talking about. Seeing Gavin, who had just entered the big tent, he hurriedly waved to him and pulled Gavin to drink again. At the end of the banquet, Sir Edmund was so drunk that he could hardly walk. Gawain had no choice but to work with his servants to help him back to the tent. After putting him on the bed, Gavin was about to leave when he suddenly found that his arm was tightly held by Edmund. At this moment, his eyes seemed to be much clearer. Edmund, with some strength, tried to sit up, took the glass of water handed over by the servant and drank it, and pointed to the box next to Gavin. "I was going to give it to you when you are an adult, but I think you need it more now, and I think it belongs to you." Gavin was full of doubts, with deep suspicion in his eyes. He racked his brains but couldn't guess what Edmund meant. Edmund leaned his head towards the box, signaling Gavin to open it. With strong curiosity, Gavin slowly walked to the box, bent down, and gently lifted the lid. In an instant, a set of plate armor came into Gavin's sight, and the reflection of the metal was particularly dazzling in this dim environment. This is a set of exquisite plate armor. Each smooth piece of armor is engraved with patterns, and the connection between the armor plates is seamless, demonstrating the maker's superb craftsmanship. The sword that accompanied it was slender and straight, with a red gem carefully inlaid on the hilt, dazzling, and the blade was so sharp that it could cut hair, faintly emitting a chilling aura. Gavin was deeply attracted by the equipment in front of him, and his eyes were full of surprise. "This was made for your father when we celebrated his coming-of-age ceremony. Now it belongs to you." At this time, Edmund had slowly stood behind Gavin. Gavin closed the box and said hurriedly, "My lord, this is so precious." Edmund smiled and waved his hand, saying, "Take it back. I just hope it can protect you in the future." "That's it. I need to rest, kid." Then he lay back on the bed. With Tommen's help, Gavin put on the full set of armor. The whole set of armor was finely crafted and extremely practical. There was a hook on one side of the armor specifically for placing a spear. Obviously, this set of armor was very expensive. Although Gavin is only 15 years old this year, he is tall and the armor fits him perfectly. Looking at myself in the mirror, a warm feeling welled up in my heart. Sir Edmund was like a warm beacon in Gavin's heart. Apart from his mother, Sir Edmund was the best person in the world to him. The fact that he was a bastard had never been a reason for Sir Edmund to dislike him. On the contrary, Sir Edmund loved him in every way and nurtured him with all his heart. This deep friendship made Gavin feel endless warmth in this complicated world. Soon it was time for the group competition to begin, still in the open space in front of the castle. The Tyrell family used logs to create a circular space with a diameter of 500 meters, less than 1 meter high and with more than entrances and exits, so that any contestant who wanted to give up could leave easily. According to the rules of the group competition, a team cannot exceed 5 people. Coach Ryan wanted to send another veteran to join, but Gavin refused. Gavin held his spear upright and walked into the arena with 3 hired gladiators. The flag of the Codoan family was hung on his spear. Soon, the venue was filled with more than 200 people, all wearing armor, holding weapons and clinging closely to their teammates. Chapter 20. Group Competition. Gavin glanced around and soon noticed the Hightower family across the street. The man holding the spear flag was a tall soldier, and beside him, 4 men were protecting him. They were all wearing fine plate armor. As if sensing something, the man holding the gun also looked at the team Gavin was in. His gaze penetrated the crowd and met Gavin's gaze in the air, as if an invisible spark was instantly created. The referee rode slowly to the center of the field and announced the rules loudly, but no one in the field was listening. Everyone's nerves were stretched to the limit, the heavy atmosphere made it almost difficult to breathe, and the tense atmosphere permeated every inch of the air. Then, the referee rode off the field on horseback. As he walked further and further away, the tense atmosphere became more and more intense, like an invisible net that tightly bound everyone. Just as he completely left the field, a horn representing the official start of the game suddenly blew, instantly igniting the impending war. Several closely related families began to move slowly and cautiously, trying to gather stronger strength in this way, so as to protect themselves and eliminate other opponents first in this fierce competition. The other relatively weaker teams saw this scene and knew clearly that they must not let the other team succeed. So they launched the attack without hesitation. The teams that were a little further away also rushed towards the team next to them that they thought they could defeat. A team on Gavin's left suddenly launched an attack. A fierce warrior holding a spear stabbed Gavin, who was holding a spear flag, like a poisonous snake coming out of a hole. The spear made a sharp sound, and it was obvious that it was going to kill Gavin with one blow. However, before the three gladiators could recover from the sudden attack, Gavin had already reacted with amazing speed. He flashed, and the spear in his hand was like a dragon emerging from the sea, accurately and powerfully picking up the opponent's helmet. Then, Gavin swung his arm and smashed the opponent with his spear with the force of thunder, knocking the man unconscious on the ground instantly, without even having time to scream. The three gladiators behind him also attacked the opponent's team immediately. Gavin didn't hesitate at all, and rushed to the battlefield at a jaw-dropping speed. His movements were extremely swift, and the spear in his hand stabbed, swept, and chopped, and each move contained 1,000 pounds of force. In just a blink of an eye, he knocked the opponent to the ground cleanly. Some of those who fell to the ground groaned in pain, while others fainted, leaving the scene in disarray. After witnessing their performance, several teams that were close to Gavin were horrified and quickly moved away from Gavin's location, fearing that they would become his next target. The melee broke out completely, and the field was in chaos. The shouts and sounds of weapons clashing were intertwined and deafening. Seeing that no one was approaching, Gavin and the others chose to wait and see, standing quietly aside and observing the situation on the field. The Hightower family did not attack other teams, but immediately deployed a defensive formation, and they had many allies. Behind him, to his left, and to his right, there was a team, and although they were not too close to each other, they had a tacit understanding and helped each other block the sneak attack from behind, forming a relatively stable defensive formation. Gradually, the situation in the field became somewhat stalemate. There were as many as 4 or 5 teams like the Hightower family. Among them, a team holding a hunter's flag was particularly strong. It defeated 2 teams alone, and now it has gathered 2 teams of allies, with a total of 13 people. For a moment, no one dared to approach. At this time, they were less than 30 meters away from Gavin's position. Seeing Gavin standing still nearby, the team did not hesitate at all, as if they had seen new prey, and charged straight at Gavin and his men. Seeing this, Gavin and his men rushed forward without hesitation. Both sides hurried forward, with fierce eyes, and a fierce confrontation was about to take place. On the main stand, a group of nobles were watching the battle. Under a hunter's flag, Randall Tarley looked at his eldest son Sam beside him and saw that he was pale and shaking uncontrollably, obviously frightened by the bloody scene. His round face was full of fear, his fat was trembling slightly, and his thick arms were shaking non-stop. Seeing this, Randall Tarley angrily scolded, "You useless thing! Don't bring this cowardly look here and tarnish the reputation of my family." After saying that, he turned his head angrily and looked at his second son Dickon next to him. He saw that the second son stared at the battlefield with a sharp gaze, without any fear. Randall Tarley couldn't help feeling annoyed and sighed, "Why is Dickon not the eldest son? Why are the 7 gods so unfair to give me such a cowardly heir?" Then he patted Dickon on the shoulder, pointed to the hunter's flag that was charging towards Gavin and others, and said seriously, "Dickon, that represents our family's motto, I am the vanguard. Remember, the glory of the Tully family lies in this: no matter what kind of enemy you face, you must always charge ahead." Now he has completely given up on his eldest son's cowardice. Fortunately he still has a qualified younger son to train. Earl Tully, who was about to continue preaching, was stopped abruptly by Dickon's sudden exclamation. Lando immediately looked towards the field and saw that facing an enemy whose number was far more than twice theirs, Gavin and his men actually launched a counterattack, and the 2 teams collided in an instant. One of the young men, like a ghost, rushed into the enemy's formation with a spear in hand. The tip of the spear was like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue, stabbing left and right, instantly disrupting the enemy's formation. The enemy soldiers responded in panic, but they were unable to stop his attack at all. Then, the young man dropped his gun and drew his sword. The sword in his hand seemed to become the messenger of death. His sword skills were superb and his sword was as sharp as the wind. Every strike of his sword was accurate to the vital point. His figure shuttled through the crowd, his sword was raised and fell, and blood was splattered everywhere. Even though they fought desperately, their moves seemed so clumsy in front of the boy's powerful swordsmanship. The boy's sword was like lightning, slashing through again and again, and the soldiers fell one after another, unable to resist this violent attack. The remaining personnel stepped back unconsciously, and their morale had collapsed. In just a moment, the tough team that no one dared to approach before had fallen to the ground. The boy's armor was covered in blood, but he did not look tired at all, instead he exuded a frightening aura. The field was filled with a strong smell of blood, and the shouts of killing seemed to become weaker at this moment. The young man stood proudly among the corpses, like a god of war descending to the world, which made people feel awe.